It's an absolute honour, to be fair. I've got a lot of respect for the man. And as many of you will know, last year was it last year or was it the year before last? He came out in the papers last year, wasn't it? Yeah, so last year Simon went public with his experiences and it was reported in the newspapers. And some of that reporting was quite negative and was very, very typical of the media's portrayal of the subject and misunderstanding of it. Very, very sad to see, and I think he's a very brave man for going public in that way. So I'd like to hand over now to Simon, and we'll kickstart his presentation. Can you all please give him a very warm round of applause? Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. First of all, I'm delighted to be invited by the chairman, Dave Hadron. Dave's right, he was the first researcher that I approached. Earlier this year, I spoke at your sister organisation. I call it your sister organisation because you're in Birmingham, Birmingham Truth. And at the end of my talk, one of the audience came up to me and said, "It's the very first time I've ever met a real-life reptilian." And interestingly enough, I did a talk in Hull 4 days ago, and the newspaper is the very first official media to use the R word. When I did the breakfast interview, I was asked to not talk about reptilians. Very interesting. Okay, my everlasting image from you will be that flying steak, I have to say. Right, we've only got 2 hours. We'll do as much as we can. We'll take questions at the end. Dave, you're going to have a break at some point, I presume.
If you want a break halfway through, you can.
I don't need a break, but the guys might need one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
so that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Tonight's talk is Illuminati. There will be elements of alien, off-world talk with it, but that's not the talk the chairman's booked tonight. This might be the only chance you ever get of actually talking to somebody who grew up in a real Illuminati family. Make it clear I'm not a member of the Illuminati. I was approached January this year to join, and I had an application form. Yeah. I kept it, and I'm very happy at the break to share it with you so you can have a look. It was from one of the magical arms of the Illuminati, the non-satanic arm. Okay, here we go. Right, you may or may not know I'm an elected Labour councillor in the town I live, and I was elected after I went public. Big problem for the people in power, because everybody was aware I come out on public with YouTube videos, the newspaper, and I was still elected. So that gives them a headache. I do confound it because the media, or some arms of the media, like to portray people who have alien experiences as half mad, running up and down the street, 2 o'clock in the morning. And when you see a guy in council meetings, some very important people, they can't square it. So I went public, Dave's right, but I went public a year before that. I went public in 2010 with YouTube videos. It was the back end of 11 that I went to the mainstream newspapers and did all that. The reason that I went public, for 2 reasons. One, I just felt that this is too big a truth. It just can't be hidden. And secondly, there are an awful lot of people out there who have experiences and have nowhere to talk to, nowhere to turn. And I thought, right, well, I'm not frightened. They can have my email address. And so during my talks, I actually put my email address up generally. So that's been wonderful, because I've had people from all over the continent who've either flown just specifically to see me, or if they can't afford the flight, then they've Skyped me. A number of people who've been on the receiving end of the Illuminati with mind control have flown over where, and I don't charge for this, I don't like the word deprogramming, but there isn't another word for it, and I don't charge for that. Community. I've always had community jobs. I actually worked for the Natural History Museum in London. I was an auxiliary lecturer, and my job was to show kids all around the dinosaurs, the exhibits. I met children from all over the world who'd arrive by coach, meet them, take them around what we call the Earth Galleries. All my jobs have actually involved working with the community, and I think that's given me the strength to actually connect with people. Being a politician, the reason I joined the Labour Party and became into politics was because I saw kids in 1979 walking around with no shoes on their feet, and that wasn't right. I work, and my private life, married, got 3 children, and again, the system has a real problem because they like to show the people who have experiences as out-and-out loners, nobody wants them, living in squalor, etc., etc. So they have a real problem with me, and Dave's right, I do get it in the net from the newspapers, but generally they do leave me alone. Okay, show of hands, who saw the Channel 4 documentary? Ooh, hands up already. Okay, a few of you. It was commissioned by an organisation called Off the Fence. Off the Fence were clearly designing the whole programme to be one of an entertainment show. And although I came out of it fairly less damaged than the others in terms of the attack, some of the other girls on that really went for them, and it was a disgrace. Okay, but what was removed, because the programme you saw wasn't really what went out. For about 40 minutes, I was interviewed on the edge of MOD land with the Fylingdales radar. We'll talk about it later. Behind me is a backdrop, and I was interviewed for about 40 minutes there. And about an hour in my own house regarding my mother's work with MI5, grandfather's work with MI6, and then I got a phone call saying that they were going to have to drop all that because they'd been lent on. 4 days before the documentary went out, I got a phone call from the security officer at Fylingdales saying, "We're very unhappy, we've heard you've done a documentary, who's doing it?" So Channel 4. They made Channel 4 take out all of the footage of my interview with Fylingdales behind me, and the MOD made them take out all of the interview with me with MI5 and MI6. The section where you might remember in my driving my 4x4 with an Audi car behind us, everybody thinks it was staged. It really wasn't. For 20 minutes after we'd done the filming outside the Fylingdales, we were followed by an Audi, and I turned to Guy, who was the cameraman, who actually did these Jamie Oliver school dinners. He was the director who did that. And I said, "Point your camera out the back, get that guy's registration number." So if you did see that, that gives you a bit more background onto it. Fylingdales. Anybody know Fylingdales? Anybody seen Fylingdales? Few people? Okay. All right. Originally, it's about 1992, the golf balls were an analogue radar array. This was at Fylingdales. 3 golf balls. It's been replaced by a phased array. It's the only one in the world. It's a 3-faced looking radar. 3-faced. It's the only one in the world. It's called RAF Fylingdales. In actual fact, it's United States of America. And we'll talk about that. They're very open. They say it's a space radar. The whistleblower about 5 years ago started using it, and they've not actually gone back on that. So they'll accept that as it's a space radar. So we'll have a closer look. That's one of the faces looking out. These are official slides from the MOD. Very kindly got them lent. So these are official slides. The official line is, this looks up 3,200 miles into space and detects any ballistic missiles that might be heading to America. The wall is called the fence. So this radar screen is known as the fence. And you can see there Fylingdales is just marked. BMUS, Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. That's its official title. And there you can see a missile coming up from the right-hand side Number 2 is the Findales detects it, and an interceptor missile is launched, and everything's jolly and dandy. Right, I want to talk about how it came about. I don't have permission to talk about my daughter very much, but I will tell you that in a previous job she was approached by somebody who was an ex-serving member of the police force, who approached her at a presentation to work and said, I know what you and your father are looking for, I can get you into any secret base in the country. So she told me and said, Dad, you know, sounds great. To which I replied, yeah, I've heard it all before, let's just ignore it. About a year later I got an email from the base wanting my registration, to make a car, the colour, and it was arranged. So my daughter and I had a private tour of the Findales base. So we arrived at the main gate. My daughter lives in London and came up the day before. And as you know, these bases are guarded by Ministry of Defence police officers with fully machine guns, not just semi-automatic machine guns. They are designed to be fully automatic. And the guy comes up, I put the window down, and my daughter said her name, and then, you know, Simon Parks, we're here for the tour. And the guy said, just one word, ID. So she hands across her passport. He looks at the passport picture, looks at her, looks back at the passport picture, looks at her, says, okay. I go to give him mine, and he raises his hand and says, that won't be necessary. So I went in. Second checkpoint, this time a woman with a list of names. Her daughter went up, same thing. I went up, she couldn't even look at me. This woman just stared continually down on the desk. Fine. Okay. Got in. When you go in, you have a presentation, PowerPoint presentation, very much like you're getting. But I spoke to 2 people, ex-military afterwards, who've also been on the tour there, and they said, I got a different tour. These are the slides that I got. During the presentation, the guy leading it showed a picture of a ballistic missile launch and said, we see these. And then he said, we see these. And then he said, we don't see these. And then he said, we sometimes see this. This was directly aimed at me. Please don't ask any questions at this tour. That's what he was saying to me. Don't ask any questions of any UFOs. We're not interested. But you know, the truth often comes out when they don't mean it. He could have shown any UFO. What he's actually shown is a picture of the alleged UFO from Area 51. Bob Lazar testified that he actually worked at Area 51, and that's actually called a sports model. So it's very interesting that they should show a picture of a craft that's supposed to come from Area 51. So anyway, we had that, and then we went round and we had our tour. At the end of the tour, it's 3 hours, it should only have been 1 hour. It was a 3-hour tour. At the end of it, he opened a cabinet and started giving out, you know, what people like little mementos, so key rings and fobs and pencils. And I went up to him and I looked on the back and there were some very nice coins, looked like coins, and I said, oh, they're very nice. And he said, oh, they are. He said, they're special, we give them as presentations. I can't, you know, you can't like, have them. So I said, oh, could you present me with one? So he looked at me and he said, well, I don't see why not. But he said, the Americans insist that I take your name. I said, you know my name? He said, yes, I know, but I had to take your name. So he said that each one, I brought it for you to have a look at. On one side it says Royal Air Force, and on the other it's got the picture of the space radar. And they're numbered. So this is number 86 of a limited edition 500, and the Americans now know that Simon Parks has 56. And it was commemorating 50 years of this base being operational. So he said, you've got to make a contribution. So I just had £10 in my pocket, gave him the £10. So I was presented with that. So you can have a look at that a bit later. One of the things that people wonder is, you know, I've come out and said my mum worked for MI5 and granddad MI6 and I have alien experiences. Yet here they are showing me around a base. And I say to people, do you know, if I was making it up, if it was full of bullshit, they certainly wouldn't have me there. They knew all about me and who I was. And for the record, it's not run by the Royal Air Force. It is an American installation, and the Americans sit behind glass doors. Okay, on the left, of course, Fylingdales. On the right, this is Men with Hills. It's a listening post. It's also an American installation. Edward Snowden recently did a runner. He was the one that broke the news that that GCHQ spy on America and America spies on Britain. It's illegal in Britain, supposedly, to have your phones or your email tapped unless there's a court order. But it's perfectly legal for the American security services to read your emails because it's a foreign country. And this is what they do. They share each other, so they don't break any rules. And he actually came out and said it. In actual fact, Edward Snowden was one of the ones who was saying that the Russians were being particularly listened to, and Dmitry Medvedev, the Prime Minister of Russia, has actually ordered 12 1933 German typewriters and ordered his staff to stop using computers because they're so regularly hacked. They are now using typewriters. That's how bad it is. And also, the Guardian newspaper, their investigative journalist, is now using a 1938 typewriter because MI5. You may have read that MI5 and GCHQ went down and made them destroy all their hard drives that relating to certain things. So now they're using typewriters. Isn't it funny how things go around? But what's really crazy is that the Germans in the Second World War were fighting fighting the Russians, and now the Russians have German typewriters. Okay. On the left-hand side, the real brains and the real power behind the world, the National Security Agency, the NSA, more powerful than the CIA, and on the right-hand side, GCHQ. That's Britain's eavesdropping experts. On the left-hand side, a picture taken 9 months ago, and on the right-hand side, taken 4 months ago, Bluffdale. President Obama, 2 years ago, signed into office the funding to allow the NSA to contain and record every email, every phone call, every piece of digital information sent in the world. Everything. The lot. Storing it here. Every piece of communication is going to be stored. People in Congress have asked why, and you can imagine the answer is just it's a national security thing. So we don't appear to have a free country here, we don't appear to have a free world, so quite simply if we accept we are not free, then who's preventing us from being free, maybe? So I want to talk about the Illuminati. This is the term that's given generally, if you go on online, this is the name that everybody seems to identify with. It is actually a way of thinking, it's a way of acting, and it's a way of ruling. So we need to really start with who or what are the Illuminati. Your chairman on the page, on the website, BUFOG website, put up the all-seeing eye and the pyramid taken from the dollar. Has everybody seen one of those dollar bills? Yeah. Okay, it has to be pre-1969. I've brought one along. You can have a look. I've got a glass for you so you can have a little look through a magnifying glass. See if you can spot the owl. There is a little owl hidden in there, which is the Illuminati symbol, and there's a little reptilian. So no prizes, but see if you can spot that. Okay, how are the Illuminati structured? This is an old graph, but it's the best one that I can find. Starting on the left-hand side, you have from the original Bavarian Illuminati. And then moving to the centre, the novice witch at the bottom. You can tell that's a magical arm. Move across, you've got the military arm, the Knights Templar. And then more of a military arm, but the one that involves politics. And on the right-hand side, you have the satanic arm. Okay? So you have the satanic side, and when people think that white is good, you have to understand that you can have pure evil. So to be dressed in white robes doesn't mean you're good. It means you're pure. You can be pure evil. So try and get away from the idea of the coloured robes. It doesn't mean anything. The approach I had could probably be something like the Rosicrucians, which is a non-satanic magical arm. Okay, so earlier this year, and I'm quite happy to let you look at it, you can't take pictures, you can't take it out, but you can have a look. The home of Freemasonry in Britain is Scotland, and this arrived for me with Scottish stamps on it, and it's entitled The Order of the Hidden Masters, and I'll just read you a front page. those of you wondering why an application form, that's exactly what I said. Why a secret society and an application form? And the answer was, well, in your case, we think everybody needs to have it written down as to what's agreed so that nobody can go back on it on a later date. The logo is OHM, Order of the Hidden Masters. I'll just read this bit out. The Order of the Hidden Masters consists of a group of teachers and students who do not reveal their identities as members to the general public, or to their friends, or even amongst themselves. They work entirely in secret and may only mention the Order to those whom they know to be worthy in every way in the manner explained hereafter. The only person who knows all of the teachers and the students is the Supreme Grand Master, the Hierophant, and he in turn is known only to those who serve on the Supreme Inner Council. This is the Illuminati. The ramifications of the order are worldwide, but none of the leaders have ever been discovered by the uninitiated anywhere. So very happy for you to have a read of this. This was an approach made to me. They knew that I wouldn't buy on something that was satanic, so they sent something not satanic, but still I wasn't interested. The Illuminati consists of a whole range of people. Unfortunately, a lot of people write on the web and they don't know what they're writing. They're just rehashing, regurgitating. They say Rothschilds, Bilderbergers. What you must try and understand is that it doesn't matter what organisational group you're in, it's who you are. You could be the caretaker, but you could be a member of the Illuminati. Because on a need-to-know basis, 9 times out of 10 you wouldn't be the caretaker. What I'm trying to get across to you is that what they will do is place people into organisations. It's not the organisations that are Illuminati, it is the individual people that have been placed in there to gain control of those organisations. Right, we'll talk about my life growing up now. My grandfather. My grandfather used to speak publicly, in public in the sense that these were small gatherings, and one of his sayings was, the public can't even go to the toilet without our help. Okay, grandfather was very upper class, so it would be WC. The politician is only concerned with the next election, the diplomat with the next generation. By their nature, the politician is beholden to the public and must inform them, but the public must never know. They are incapable of making the right decisions. We do that for them. You getting the flavour of this now? Right, my grandfather. In 1932, he went off to India, having served in the First World War as the youngest company sergeant major in the British Army. He was 18. So off to India in 1932. There was a demonstration and a riot, people in India trying to throw the British out, and he was quite instrumental in gaining control of this riot, and he was awarded the OBE medal, and with it went an appointment to join MI6. Now, people who genuinely have experience at the security services don't use the word MI6. I use the word MI6 because that's what you guys know. It's the SIS, the Secret Intelligence Services. By the late 1930s, it became MI6 as sort of under the term name. Those of you who probably have heard this one, I'll just very quickly go over it. King Edward VIII, if you read the official histories, King Edward VIII had an affair with Wallace Simpson, and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prime Minister were so horrified because Wallace Simpson was a divorcee that they said to the King, well, you can't marry a divorcee, you'll have to resign or abdicate. And so the jolly old King abdicated. And that's what the history books will tell you, even now. What my grandfather said, and I think it's beginning to come out now, is that Wallace Simpson was having an affair with one of the attachés or the ambassador of the German embassy based in London, none other than a guy called von Ribbentrop. Von Ribbentrop had targeted her because she was also having an affair with the king, and the object was to do two things: one, to steal documents, and secondly, to try to circumvent Chamberlain so that Britain would not go to war with Germany and would stay neutral. And this is why Rudolf Hess flew, but that's another story anyway. So it got to the point where they had to confront the king and say, look, you know, we think you're going to have to stop this, and he refused point blank. So the Prime Minister turned to somebody in the Illuminati and said, what do I do? And he was told, form a jury of 12 good men and true, and then get them to vote on whether the king stays or goes. My grandfather was one of those 12 men. He was in India, and he said to me that he got a coded message which quite simply said, should the king go or stay? And I said to grandfather, well, what did you reply, grandfather? It was always grandfather, it was never granddad. He was very, very clear on that. And he said, I said the king had to go. So my next question was, what was the vote? And it was something along the lines of 10 voted for the king to go, 2 to stay. So the Prime Minister then felt that he had the strength of the country behind him, went to the king and said, you have to go. The king said, very well, because he wasn't going to fight the Illuminati. Very well, but I want to go on to BBC, the Home Service, and tell everybody what's happened here. And the Prime Minister said to him, I have given instructions that all the doors to the radio office are to be locked. You are not allowed to do any such thing. The king abdicated. That's the reality, that's what happened. And I always say this to people because I try to hammer it home. That was 1936. My grandfather was not elected by anybody. The king was not elected by anybody. So you have 2 unelected people making the decisions, and you, or your family before you, had no vote and say in the matter. That's 1936. So just imagine how sewn up tight it is now. Let's move on. He returned back to Britain from India, and he worked very hard to get America to come in on the war against Germany. I know the war was before that, but that was the period of time he was working hard. War was declared on 3rd of September 1939. My grandfather was considered so important, they did not want him in London where a stray bomb might kill him, and they said, we have to get you out. Do you want to be an officer in the army, or do you want a political or diplomatic position? He said, I'll take a diplomatic post. And he took a post as vice consul for the British Embassy in Pondicherry, which is in India. A destroyer was sent for him, and he went on a boat with a destroyer escort. And that was the 11th of September. So less than 1 week after Chamberlain said that Britain was at war, they got my grandfather out. Less than 1 week. When he arrived there, he demanded that his wife and 2 children should be brought to India, and another destroyer was dispatched, and they were then taken there. He was given an understrength platoon of Gurkha bodyguards. These were not to protect the British building, they would protect him. They were his bodyguards. And he was promoted to British consul. Why was he not the British ambassador? Because there's a standing rule in all countries that the ambassador is never involved in espionage. The ambassador must always be above it, but anybody below the ambassador can be a secret agent. And that's every country in the world follows that rule. Okay, after the war, India gained independence. My grandfather was posted to other countries, United States of America, the Near and Far East, and France. And he met Stalin in 1947, and then he was awarded the MBE. He returned to the United Kingdom and was awarded the CBE, which he was very proud of as commander of the British Empire. He had a falling out with the British Prime Minister. Even now I can't tell you who that is, but he had a falling out with him. And he was offered and accepted a diplomatic post as Britain's representative to the United Nations. So he went off to the UN. It was time to retire from diplomatic life, but he remained an active member of the SIS. He was allowed to officially retire from the SIS in 1965. He was offered a knighthood to make him Sir James Owen Marsland. He went for a fitting of the gown, but he saw the emblem on the front of the gown. I've got a picture for you. And when he saw that, he just thought, well, that's New World Order. I'm not having that. He declined it. But he became a companion. And he was told told, well, if I nip across, he was offered stocks and shares in Rolls-Royce. He said, I don't want the motor car industry, there's no deal in that, I want the side that has the engines, Rolls-Royce engines. And he went to Mapping the Webs in Regent Street in London to choose any jewellery that he wanted. The reason for that was he was told that the British government was going to remove any record of him at all, which meant no state pension, no civil service pension, nothing. He would have to survive on his stocks and shares. They didn't want him linked to the government at all. So we really can call him an illustrious grandfather. This is a painting of Edward VIII. He was very much the wayward king. He went to Wales and took pity on the miners, turned to politicians and said, why are these people living in poverty? What's going on in this country? And from that moment onwards, they didn't want him going and seeing ordinary people. Grandfather was always very annoyed because had he been in Britain when the vote was taken, he would have been given a coin, a penny in 1936 with, there's about 12 or 15 in the world made. And he said to me right back then it was worth £250,000. Each one of them who took part in that vote was given a memento of the fact. I've got the coin here, and it actually says Edward VIII on it. They were only minted in, I think, three mints. And in Britain, literally, what they did with them was given to whoever was voting here, and the rest was buried under buildings, Illuminati buildings. So wherever the cornerstone is, they stuck them under there. But you can have a look at the coin when we have a break. And here's the big reason. In 1937, there's the king, as he could have been, but of course he's just now plain old Mister. And Wallace Simpson meeting Adolf Hitler. And that's again why Hess flew to Britain, but we'll have that one on the day. Okay, we're going to move across to about Iran. Very interesting this. On the left-hand side is the Shah of Iran, and on the right-hand side, somebody you won't perhaps really have heard of, is Mohammad Mossadegh, who was Prime Minister from 1951 to 1953. Okay, did you know that in 1941, Great Britain and Russia invaded Iran to remove the then ruler and put the Shah into power? That's something that doesn't come out very much. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh was democratically elected as the Iranian Prime Minister. In 1953, he said to the Persian Anglo Oil Company, you're drilling all oil in our country and you're taking all the oil and you're not giving us any money. That doesn't seem fair to me. How about a 50-50 split? So the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which you now know as BP, said, well, we can't be having that. We can't be losing our profits. So they went to the CIA and said to the CIA, what can you do? And the CIA said, well, we're not going to do anything about it. They went to the Illuminati through MI6. My grandfather, we want this man removed. There was a change in American president at that time. I think it was Eisenhower, possibly Eisenhower, to check that one out. There was a change in president, and the CIA, with MI6 backing, deposed Mohammad Mossadegh. And hey-ho, all the oil companies were denationalised and everything was hunky-dory. This is what you don't read about. So they got rid of him. He was democratically elected. Whatever you might think of Iran, the man was democratically elected, but wanted something for the people of his country, and the shareholders weren't going to have that. You all know this man as Ayatollah Khomeini. His actual title is Imam Khomeini. The Secret Service had a number of attempts, had a number of opportunities to remove him and never did. He spent time in Turkey, a hell of a lot of time with Saddam Hussein, and then 3 to 4 months before he was due to take power when the Shah had been thrown out, he fled to France. Now my grandfather, who was about 82 or 83 at the time, got back in touch with the powers and said, let me go to France, I can convince the French to let a hit squad kill him. And they said, no, we can't do that because the French are very, very wobbly, we can't really afford that. And my grandfather was always adamant, up to the day he died, that that was the opportunity that had he been allowed, he would have wiped that man out. Now, when I stand here and talk about grandfather and mother, people say, well, prove it. Well, you don't because you're aware, but there's an awful lot of people who say, prove it. I've been very lucky, I've got something. I want you to look at this. James Marsland, 11th of September 1933, this is from a ship's manifest. Sailing to Bombay, born in 1896, and here's the key, it says occupation vice consul. This man was real, he worked for the government, he had a diplomatic passport. The CBE medal looks like that, that's not his, I had to lift this off the internet, it was the one he was extremely proud of because it's for the Empire. It was created for the Empire. He declined the knighthood. The knighthood would have been under the order of St. Michael and St. George. You know who St. George is, slays a dragon, doesn't he? That's what the gown would look like, and he had a fitting for it. But when you had a closer look at the emblem, that looks all right, doesn't it? There's a dragon, or a reptile, or the devil on the floor, and then there's an angel over the top, sort of hold it down, and it says a token of a better age. But my grandfather understood that to mean a new world order, and so he declined it. He didn't want to be beholden to them in that side of it. Grandfather was not a Satanist. Okay, let's talk about my mother. My mother worked for the British Security Service. You don't say MI5, you say BSS, or verbally SS, which is a bit of a problem. So you could say that the British Security Service, very few people will write SS, for obvious reasons. My mother used to say the public can't be told about aliens. Just look at Orson Welles and his H.G. Wells adaptation. If you're aware of that, there was a radio broadcast that went out and it caused absolute panic in America, which Orson Welles narrated. My mother also said, if we're not there to hold their hands, what would the great unwashed do? Meaning the general public. And she said, they're all just children. They can't decide for themselves. Okay, so who's really calling the shots? We have the pyramid with a seeing eye, and it says there, UK Intelligence MI5. Yep, that's it. There's the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, so you really know who the Illuminati are, don't you? You haven't got the alien talk tonight, so you're not going to get too much. But my mother was told that because she was a British subject, she was managed by MI5, but in reality all her work was for the National Security Agency of America. So it was shared with Britain, but all her work was controlled by the National Security Agency, who are bigger than the CIA. People know the CIA, they don't know the NSA. All right, brief talk about my mother. My mother was a copy typist in the solicitors in Hove from 1962 to 1963. And that meant that she typed complex documents. Could be land registry, could be buildings, could be anything, but they would be complex, they wouldn't be just straightforward. From 1964 to 1979, she held the title of Special Projects Typist. Now that sounds really, really... What it actually means is, when somebody came in with an invention, she would be the person who typed it up. So a patent office is where you patent your invention. You invent something, could be a board game, could be a new combustion engine. You go in and you say, has anybody made this before? You pay whatever it is you pay, they check it, no, this is new. And so you patent it in your name. It becomes your product and you can then sell it. So between 1964 and 1979, she was Special Projects Typist. However, between 1966 and 1979, she worked for the British Security Services, working from home. She signed the Official Secrets Act sometime in the mid-1960s. Sometime in the mid-1960s. I can't remember exactly when. So I'll very briefly talk about the day-to-day work. Forgive me if you've seen this on one of my YouTube videos, but it's really important and it's worth going through it. A guy with a false name, and the name he gave us was Paul Dunlop, would turn up with documents which were cream-coloured, bigger than A4, all in German, with the German eagle on the front. West German in those days, West German Republic. Lovely seals in wax on the front, and he would hand it to my mother, take a small penknife from his pocket, cut the ribbon which secured from one seal to the other around the front, signed or initial the top right hand corner. My mother took it and signed her name on the top right hand corner. That document was now her property. With it he gave her a spool of tape, and he had read through the documents, and read a sentence at a time. One sentence in German, then in English. Her job was to put earphones in, advance the tape, hear one sentence, and type it out in English. These documents were from about 5 pages thick to about 15, 16 pages thick. Not huge documents. They contain blueprints, and I remember as a boy putting your hand on it and you get blue, like blue ink all over your hand. Some of the paper was thin as onion skins. All had drawings, designs, but all in German, not in English at all. All these documents related to crashed craft, crashed UFOs that had come down on the Earth. The documents never said how they'd been brought down, where they'd come down, or the date. The format was always the same. We've got this piece of machinery. What can you do with it? How can you develop it for us? And it just felt, each document, each time she got one, just followed the same format. On the top, in red ink, was either the words secret, top secret, very top secret, or in purple ink, extremely top secret. And she worked on these for maybe 4, 5, 6 days. If it was a short document, maybe a fortnight, it was a big document. And she would walk out the house and a green Jaguar would wait for her. She would pass code words with the front passenger, get into the back seat. On the back seat was a copy of the Financial Times. She'd put her typed document into the Financial Times, be driven to Brighton railway station, and she'd buy a platform ticket for 2p. She'd go and sit on the London-bound platform, then a guy would get out, bowler hat, red carnation, pinstripe suit, suitcase, umbrella, copy the Financial Times under his arm, sit next to my mother, and they would pass code words. He would give her his copy of the Financial Times, she would give her his, with the documents in it. He'd get back on the train, off he went. Why did my mother join the Secret Service? Because she was a single parent, and she had one wage, which she had from the Patent Office. And the deal was that she would get 2 wages. So in actual fact, what happened was that she was told that every Friday at 3:30 she had to walk to her office, where she would go to reception, she would sign her name, and she would be given her wages. She didn't have to do a day's work there. She didn't actually have to work there. She was being paid by these people on a weekly basis for nothing, and on a monthly basis, then Paul Dunlop would come and then he would pay her. And she was told that that job was there for her whenever she wanted. In other words, they promised her that if she wanted to leave at any time, she could, and she was even shown by the manager, or one of the partners, I should say, there's your chair, there's your typewriter, and there's your desk. And nobody will sit in there, and if you're 5 years, 10 years, 15 years away from us, don't worry about it, that job is yours when you come back. So that's what she did. Mother didn't drive, and they offered her a motor car, and she said no, not really, and they just said, well, would the boy like one? Well, yes please. I've got lots of presents like that. In 1979, she became an alcoholic because she couldn't cope with what she was reading. It became too much. Also, she was very loyal to this country. She didn't talk to anybody. She didn't discuss it. And for those years, reading and understanding at the level of which she was reading and understanding just became too much. So she went to her handlers and said, I've had enough, I want my old job back, you promised it to me. And they were as good as gold. They gave her a job back, and then 2 weeks later she was dead. Died of a heart attack. But the underlying story there is my mother had asthma. And I know this sounds very naive, but sometimes people aren't always in their right mind around security service. She met a man who she'd never met before, who convinced her to drink herbal medicine to make her asthma better. And she used to come back with these bottles. So 2 weeks later she was dead. And in fact, I don't mind admitting I was really upset. I was really sort of cut up about it, and I wanted to leave Brighton and start afresh, go to London, get a job in London. And I think it was the day before I was due to leave, an envelope came through the door with a couple of £1,000 in used notes, and just a typed note which said, "Don't look back, Dick Whittington." So that was another present they gave me. I understand why they did it, because she was a loose cannon. they had no alternative, because from their point of view, she had all this knowledge and they'd lost control of her. So that's from their point of view. Let's talk about some of the work she did. We talk about German documents on Operation Paperclip, which I'm sure most of you will have heard of. It's where the Americans forgave the Nazi scientists their crimes and said, you know, come to America and we'll look after you. What my grandfather told me was that in 1945, as parts of Germany were falling under the Allied hands, the Americans became more and more gobsmacked at what they were finding, and they altered their plans. Those members of the Secret Service in America who were looking for war criminals were told, forget that, start rounding up scientists. So I want to have a quick look at this guy. This guy at the front is Hermann Oberth, and the guy... That one there is Werner von Braun, who joined what became NASA and helped to invent the Saturn V rocket. In 1972, Hermann Oberth actually made a statement, and I'll just read it out to you. It's very interesting. People say there's no evidence out there. Hermann Oberth. We can't take credit. This is the Nazis, not America. We can't take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped, and we have been helped by the people of other worlds. And he said that in 1972. And it was von Braun who was taken to the Roswell crash site, and one of the American intelligence guys said to him, this reminds me of an aeroplane. And von Braun said, well, you know, we did get help, you know. So in other words, two top German scientists who ended up working for NASA both declared that extraterrestrial, I'm going to use that word at the moment, extraterrestrial intervention helped Germany technologically to get the march on every other country in the world. And this is the plane. On the left-hand side is good old Kenneth, who saw some UFOs early 1947. And at a later date he did a drawing of this one. And the resemblance to the Gopher Go 229 in its tail is remarkable. It doesn't mean necessarily that UFOs were copied from German aircraft. My understanding is that the Germans were trying to create aircraft similar to what they were seeing, but they had to use traditional jet engines. Roswell, you're all familiar with Roswell. You can't hear being BUFOG and not. So I'm going to whip through this because you're going to know more than I will. There's your newspaper heading. And the intelligence office, Jesse Marcel, told the world that a flying saucer had been captured. RAAF is Roswell Army Airfield. And told them they'd captured it and it was going to be sent off to higher headquarters. That's all they were told. Everything else was about witnesses, etc., etc. That's Jesse Marcel. If you ever see a man lying, look at his eyes. I feel for that man. Here he is sitting in General Roger Ramey's office with what's very clearly a meteorological balloon and trying to pass that off as the wreckage that was found and sent off. Anybody who would think that a major in the counterintelligence, that's the job Jesse Marcel had, couldn't tell the difference between a wrecked weather balloon and alien spacecraft, it just needs their head examining. This man would not have sent pieces of weather balloon up to higher headquarters. On the left-hand side is General Roger Ramey, and on the right-hand side is Adjutant Colonel Du Bois. Roger Ramey is holding in his hand a telegram. That's interesting. Lots of pictures of that telegram. Back in 1947, if you were standing 12 feet away from somebody, there's no way you could read that telegram. And if you were taking photographs, there was no way you could do that. He wouldn't have known that many, many years later, with digital technology, it would be possible to read that telegram. Think how many government ministers have lost their job going into 10 Downing Street because they've held their briefing papers the wrong way up. And then the score of pressmen and women over there photographing them, and then the world knows about it before they've even talked about it in Parliament. That's why they always carry their papers towards their chest or in a case. But back in 1947, that wasn't possible, was it? But of course it is, because that's good enough to stick through software and have those words interpreted. I'm sure you've all seen this, but just in case any of you haven't, let's read it out. It's a bit jumbled. So, acknowledges that a disk is the next new find west of the cordon. That location was a wreck near the operation. It says, and in addition, there's a few words missing. It uses the word pod and airfoil. And it says the ranch and the victims of the wreck you forwarded to it'd be the CIC team at Fort Worth. The aviators in the disc. Now that's very interesting, not victims, aviators. Sounds as if they're alive. Aviators in the disc, they will ship for A1, 8th Air Force Army Command. And then there's an interesting word, visitors, but we don't know any more than that. By B-29, C-47, Wright Airfield assesses the airfoil at Roswell, assure us about the flyout, and the counterintelligence team said that this misstate, not mistake, misstate. The mistake meaning of the story that's about the UFO the flying saucer found, and they think that later today send it out as PR of weather balloons, and that they would fare much better if you had some teams and photographs. So that is the telegram. The problem is there is so much evidence out there, but so many people are conditioned. The only way they're going to believe the truth is when a guy in a suit, a tie and a shirt on the BBC News comes on and says, you know what, aliens are real. You weren't told because we thought you'd panic. That's the only way people will believe. And that's not likely to happen for quite a long time. Okay, lots and lots of renditions of the Roswell crash. This is the one I like the best. It's a diorama. I think accurately the split down the side of the craft with some bodies that either ejected or crawled out. Quite like that one. This is a model you can get. You can't get them in Britain, so you have to go on eBay, get them in America. Lovely aircraft. Fantastic. Okay. Well, we know when the craft crashed. Do you know, less than 3 months later, the National Security Act was put into place, and President Truman signing it there. What happened to make a country completely change its security posture? It went right through the Second World War with the same security posture, but I think, to be truthful, within 6 to 7 weeks of the Roswell incident, the CIA was formed. And the CIA and the National Security Council came into effect on that signing. The CIA was designed purely to deal with the alien agenda, and the National Security Council, which was headed by the President, was designed to keep a lid on it. The R word, David Icke, in one of his chapters, says, don't mention the reptiles, and in his book, The Biggest Secret, he gives his reasons why people don't like talking about the reptiles. A couple of people actually said to me, why didn't I ever go into the security services? My grandfather, my mother, why is it Mr. Generation out? I think that's probably the reason why I am not in the security services. Quick look, we talked about being free, we talked about the Illuminati, and we talked about control. After all, everyone's a prisoner here on this planet. 21st of December, big PSYOP operation to make people think that the Earth was going to shake, or there's going to be a big burst of lightning or an earthquake, and when it didn't happen, the whole object was hoping people would think nothing happened. It did happen. Okay, this is the Hadron Collider, also known as the CERN device. You can see it in construction on the left-hand side. It's on the border of France and Switzerland. Hands up those who know about the Hadron Collider. Wow! I'm in the right place. Who's that? Ah, gotcha. Okay. He can trace his lineage right back to the ancient Mayan kings. His name is Akhtar. And I was on a website which is run by Bill Ryan of Project Camelot fame. Bill Ryan asked me to join his website. And I've been banging on about the Hadron Collider. And somebody said, my God, have you seen this guy? He's saying exactly what you're saying, and they posted me a link. And this guy was saying the Hadron Collider was a very bad thing, and it was going to have a detrimental effect on the ascension. and he was going around all the hidden pyramids in South America, doing ritualistic dancing and placing some ritualistic devices which he hoped would counteract the effect of the Hadron Collider. Of course, the modern world laughed at him. Those people who were more spiritually concerned began to realise there was something going on. Here is the Hadron Collider, larger picture of it. It has two purposes. One is as a weapon, space-based weapon, and secondly, if I use the word loosely, as a time machine, a device that can affect time, but not, please, in H.G. Wells, travelling through time. This is basically where you'd fire your beam around there. Okay. It became known to a few people that the device was going to operate over the crucial period of the Ascension, which is probably from the 19th of December to the 22nd of December. Energy peaked on the 21st, but was building all the time. And this device was designed to run over, and there were some people moaning because there were scientists from all over the world couldn't be with their families. Thousands of people are employed at that base, and yet they were going to run it over Christmas, and families were going to have not their mums and dads and all the rest of it. That was very odd. And it became very obvious to me that this device would probably be better not working. It would be better if it didn't work over that period of time. I'm delighted to tell you that it didn't work over that period of time. Here's a screenshot. Shut down, no beam. That is a screenshot from one of their computers showing to the public that it didn't operate over the set time, and they put a nice gloss on it saying we're back in 2015. Notice 2015. The reason for it is that the window of opportunity the Illuminati have runs out at the end of 2015. So the original idea was to build a new device. They don't have the time to build a new device. What they've now agreed is they're going to build a bigger device on the same place. All things in this world are money orientated, yet you'll find there are no private companies in this. No private company will give billions of pounds or dollars if there's no return. There is no return on this. There's no financial return. So what they've done, the Illuminati in America, has gone to all their friends and made them raid their black budgets. Taxpayers, your money, my money, to pay for this. It's a consortium, but they don't run it. So it was very imperative for the good of humankind on this planet that this device did not operate over the Ascension period. Akhtar was a backstop. Had this device activated, it would have all been on him and what he was doing in South America. Fortunately, it wasn't required because the machine didn't work. We won't talk about why it didn't work, because I don't want to go to prison. Right. You're probably aware that for many, many years the Illuminati have had the intention of killing off maybe 50, 60, 70% of the world's population. It's a genuine desire. However, the good news is that through modern technology, they might not have to kill off 3/4 of the population because they can control everybody with microchips. So, in fact, it was Werner von Braun who actually said that the last big false flag would be a pretend alien invasion. We need an alien invasion because it's the only way to get every country in the world to fall in behind everybody else. Right, so there'll be a lockdown on the internet. You wouldn't have any internet, you wouldn't have any mobile phones, you wouldn't be allowed to travel, etc., etc. You can imagine. We're talking about 3 to 4 days, not very long. You'll then be told that the aliens have been defeated. However, they will find humanoid clones. Oh dear. Right. And there's a second invasion coming. Oh dear. So the only way to do this is to have a one world government. And do you know what? In order to stop people being infiltrated by clones, we're going to chip you all. And then when you go to the supermarket, we'll scan you. So if you've got a chip, I know you're human, I'll let you come into the supermarket. But if you don't have a chip, you must be a clone, you're an alien. So you better get chipped. radio frequency chipping. Let's have a look. This is the picture you're bound to be familiar with. On that side is a grain of rice, and we use it for pets. Very useful for your dog and cat. If it gets lost, it gets scanned and has your address. This is where it gets a bit dodgy. Shops, unless you've got the tin foil in the carrier bags. That is in fact a chip, but a very, very basic one. But what that did was give them the idea. So the little black dots are the same thing, and the little crystals are sugar grains. This is injectable. These can be injected into your bloodstream, but you wouldn't have them that sort of square shape because they get cut in your veins and arteries. So they would be cylinder shaped. And the black dot on the thumb is a chip. Now, this is what we know, but we can be sure that in some laboratory they're even smaller than this. So that RFID chip, if you have that and you walk within 30 feet of a scanner, it will say who you are, what you are. But it's a bit worse than that. I don't know if you shop in Co-op. Anybody shop in Co-op? Right, okay. Well, where I live there's a Co-op, and they're the very first supermarket to go across to the swipe in your phone. So you don't have to pay by credit card now. You get your mobile phone in your hand, and instead of your credit card, you put your mobile phone down, and it just goes straight to your bank account, takes the money out. But it's just been trialled at the moment, and Co-op are doing it. And this is an Illuminati trap. I'll show you why. We're all as bad as each other. We go around with our mobile phones in our hands, left-handed or right-handed. So let's just imagine no more credit cards, okay? And I've got to pay for anything. I put the phone down. After 2 years of doing that, they could say to you, that's a bit of a bind, isn't it? Why don't we just put the chip in your hand? You're so used to putting your phone down when you pay, it's exactly the same action. It's all psychological, you see. Now, the problem with that is that if I go on a demonstration, or you go on a demonstration and you do something or say something the government doesn't like, they'll just turn your bank account off. So you see, don't have to kill 3/4 of the population, they just turn your bank account off. And you either be a good boy, and will put your bank account back on, it will just let you starve to death. That's the plan. Anybody heard of the 2025 soul catchers? No? All right, okay, you're in for a treat then. I'll read it. As long ago as 1995, British Telecom announced it was developing a memory chip designed to capture a person's entire lifetime's experiences. The chip would be implanted behind the eye, probably on the optic nerve. BT said that the chip would record the person's thoughts, feelings and memories and store them in digital form. BT confirmed the chip would be ready for use by the year 2025, hence the name Soul Catcher. So you have to understand that this is really, the technology is there now. So they have a chip in your body which records everything that your eyes see, your ears hear and what you feel. Okay? And that was back in the 90s, 1995. Imagine what there is now. All right, are you okay? Do you want a break? You want me to carry on? What do you want? No, I'm asking you. What do you want?
Carry on.
Carry on, right, okay. Satanism. Satanism is the driving force of the Dark Masters. You have to understand that this is really quite serious now. If you get caught as a Satanist, you have to be passed off as paedophilia. Okay? Because Satanism can't be outed, so you're charged as being paedophilia. We're going to look at some of this now. I'm sorry, it's not a particularly nice subject, but it's part of the deception being practiced on the vast majority of humans on this planet. And in the end, the Illuminati are so clever, they just wipe it out completely so that you don't see anything. Okay. We have here a copy of the Daily Express. This was an electronic copy and never made it into public print. Savile was part of a satanic ring. And even worse, it actually says that during heinous sexual acts against a 12-year-old girl, he chanted in Latin, "Hail Satan." So this man wasn't a paedophile, he was a Satanist. That's why he was protected, ladies and gentlemen. Not because he was a paedophile, because he was a high-ranking member of the Freemasonry and a high-ranking member of the Illuminati, and he could not afford to be got until he was dead. That was the deal. Let's talk about that. This is one of Jimmy Savile's homes. I'm not telling you where it is. I'm not telling you how the picture is got. Look, somebody has actually daubed a pyramid and the all-seeing eye. Somebody knew Savile was in the Illuminati. The police got there just after that person had made a runner. And this was a journalist who sent me this photograph up on a hilltop. So somebody knew that we weren't dealing with a paedophile, we were dealing with somebody from the Illuminati. Ted Heath. My mother said that Ted Heath didn't have the word paedophile back in the 70s. She just called him a pervert. And she said that from MI5 friends that Edward Heath was abusing children on his yacht Morning Cloud. So it's very interesting that he appeared on a television show with Jimmy Savile. And did you know that the Queen actually asked Jimmy Savile to intercede between Charles and Diana when their marriage was breaking up? Why is that? Why is a top show pop artist that high? Why would the Queen ask the disc jockey to intervene in that way? Yeah. This is Savile's funeral. My daughter was not invited to this, but she was in the building next door. And this is taken from the BBC. And the question that nobody asked at the time is, why are the Freemasons attending his funeral? This is a very interesting man, Lord Louis Mountbatten, blown up in his boat in about 1979, 1980. I won't talk about too much about that. Here's an interesting picture. Charles on the left, his father in the middle, and somebody else on the right-hand side. Have I got that wrong? Have I? Oh, have I got that wrong? Look at the foreheads of the man in the middle, who is Lord Louis Mountbatten. Okay, that's Lord Louis Mountbatten in the middle, and that's Charles. He's got his hand on his shoulder. Who's Charles' real dad? I wonder why Charles won't be king. Why is Charles being missed out? Interesting, isn't it? I won't say any more. Oh, and this is very interesting. This is a Christmas card to Jimmy Savile from Charlie. And it says, Jimmy, wishing you a very happy Christmas and New Year with kindest regards, Charlie and Camilla. My favourite. There she is. Isn't she wonderful? Look at the nurse. Look at the belt buckle. It's enlarged on the left-hand side. In God's name, what medical society has the magical pentagram and the Illuminati sign, the Freemasonry sign? Look at the woman's face. That isn't a nurse. That's a minder. Look at her. That's what normally happens at the hospital. Is that the royal family come out from the King Edward VII Hospital, and the staff stay back. But the Queen was in such a very bad way that for the first time a member of staff came out of the doors assisting her. Look at that face. You get a face on a prison warder. Okay, that is an incredibly important photograph, ladies and gentlemen. You have a nurse wearing a belt buckle that you will not find in any medical dictionary anywhere. Look at the Queen's face. That is somebody who is changing. Regardless of whether you like it or not, that is not a natural stare. Look at that. I love that picture. Pope. Let's have a look. First of all, yes, why is the Pope wearing a devil on his... Why would the Pope have that? But what's much more interesting to me is I want you to look at the mouth. Because if you look at his teeth, the teeth are not straight. The whole jaw is changing and going downwards. The teeth, don't look at the teeth coming down. If you were to project that, it's coming down there. That's why this Pope had to go. That's why he got rid of him. He was changing. Okay, King of England, giving the devil's sign. Not very clever. In actual fact, in Illuminati stance, that is a hex. When you do that, I'm not even going to do it because we don't do it. But if you were to do it and point, you are hexing somebody. And this is a Reuters photograph. And even if he's doing it in jest, he shouldn't do it because it's evil. So we'll just get rid of him. But that's your next King of England. So you know exactly where he's come from, don't you? We have Obama. Now, I know people say, oh, it's the bullhorns. Well, why is the Pope doing it as well? What's the link between the Pope and the President of the United States? Interesting. We know this man, don't we? 3/6, you familiar with this one? Okay? 3/6, the sign of the devil. And Tony Blair's giving at a conference the sign of the devil, 3/6. When I was growing up as a boy, I think I'll wait that when we show that one. One of the first times that the 666 signal and the devil sign was used together in one picture, and this is the Beatles promoting Yellow Submarine 1969. So there we've got Lennon doing that, McCartney doing that. Okay? When I was growing up, about 14, 15 years of age, John Lennon's father, Freddie Lennon, remarried a much younger woman, and they had 2 children, and I was asked to babysit for the children while they went out. And I think people say, well, you know, Freddie Lennon could have picked up the phone to anybody in the world and said, any agency in the world, send me someone to look after these children. And I was told, no, the only person we want to look after our children is you, because you understand them. And as a 5-year-old boy, I can't remember his name now, Lennon's young kid, I can't remember, anybody remember Lennon's kid? Julian, thank you. I can remember Julian as a 5-year-old boy playing the piano. Literally just there playing. I babysat 5 or 6 times. His Freddie Lennon's new wife was into astrology. And she did my mother's horoscope and refused to tell her what it was because she foresaw her death. Fortunately, she told me what mine was. And I always remember sitting on the very first time, because I had to go around and have a meal with them, and they all had spaghetti bolognese, and she said to me, I know that you won't eat food like that in public because it's too messy and you're very self-conscious of food, so I've done you completely different food. I knew from that moment that astrology was the real deal. She couldn't know that otherwise. Okay, I want to be very clear on this. This is David Icke, who I've got the highest regard for, and this was his second wife, Pamela, who was a plant. David didn't realise, and here she's giving the 666 signal, and that is the reason that David Icke dropped her, because she was a plant from the Illuminati to knock him off course. Fortunately, it didn't work. So there you go, the 666. This is from Pamela's website. Looks really nice, except you can see it's a 666 again. Once a Satanist, always one. We'll give her a little wobble there. Okay, that's not the Star of David, that's a pentagram. I come from Whitby. Whitby is a very magical place. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. Dracula was set in Whitby. And so, not surprising that it's a place where a coven would meet. And on the walls, in charcoal, I found that, which is really nice, and that which is not so nice, because it's making very clear that that's a satanic group that meets on the beach, God knows what time in the morning. My mother's favourite singer was Roy Wood, wizard. And I always said to her, why do you like him? Because he's a wizard. And he wore a star on his forehead. Give him a little dance. My mother's favourite film, 1927, Metropolis. Silent film, made in Germany. And there's the wonderful pentagram behind. You can get jewellery on the web that looks like this, and it's sold as a Wicca symbol, good luck Wicca symbol. Watch it, because that's not actually what it means. This is the rank of a witch. The moon, that's why Diana was known as the moon goddess, Princess Diana, who was murdered. And the gem or teardrops rank that witch. So you have 1, 2, 3, you can actually have more. Women can actually rise quite high in the Illuminati. The word grandmother, exactly what it means, like grandmaster, grandmother. So this, although it may be in this photograph just used as a bit of nice decoration, is an Illuminati symbol, and I would expect to see it worn as a jewellery around the neck, with a stone, maybe opal for the moon, maybe red for a ruby, for blood, and then on chains the number, little gems in a teardrop shape dropping down, denoting the rank of that witch. 1965-71. Using cinema and TV for instructional purposes. If you can imagine Illuminati families throughout the world, you can't get everybody together. So what you do is you control the media, and then just as perhaps you, like I, when I was at school, primary school, we all sat around the television or we sat around the radio. Well, if you control the media, you can start running out programs specifically aimed at your Illuminati families throughout the world. They don't have to come to you then. Very clever, actually. So I never saw things like Bambi or Jungle Book or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. My mother wouldn't take me to see films like that. The very first film she took me to see was The Alamo in 1964. I was about 4.5 years old. She said to me, "What film do you like best?" I said, "Cowboys." So I was taken to see that, not because it was a cowboy film, because my mother wanted to see if I could sit still long enough through a film. As soon as that was over, within about 3 weeks of that, I was taken to see a film called Dr. Strangelove. Anybody seen that film? Well, one hand's gone up. It's about nuclear. You, Dave. It's about nuclear war between America, and Peter Sellers is in it. And I remember going in as a 4.5-year-old boy, and the woman cashier on the desk with the ticket saying to my mother, "Do you think that's the right sort of film to bring this boy to? Don't you think he'd be scared?" And it got very heated, and then the manager was called, and the manager didn't give a shit about that. All the manager was concerned about was, will this boy run up and down the aisles, upsetting the rest of my patrons? So anyway, I got in and saw the film, and I was the youngest person there, and I really enjoyed it. Other films that my mother said you are going to see, and she took me to, 2001, Metropolis, Forbidden Planet, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Things to Come, Planet of Vampires, This Island Earth, Planet of Storms, and Chariots of the Gods. In fact, Chariots of the Gods was running as a B-movie. It was a background to what we used to have in those days as the major film, and then they would put a little film on as a filler in. And we saw the filler in, and then the intermission came on for the big film to come. My mother just stood up and said, "We're going now. That's what we came to see." That was 1969. So all of these run from 1964 to, I suppose, 69, something like that. But there are other films, such as Ice Station Zebra and that. But no, I wasn't allowed to see Planet of the Apes because my mother said that was just nonsense, or Man from U.N.C.L.E., or Jungle Book, or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or Railway Children. They're not part of your education. In fact, my friends at school's parents used to take me. They felt sorry for me. So when they took their kids to see Jungle Book, I used to go along. That was all right, because my mother wasn't doing it. Okay, so you're going to the cinema. Stanley Kubrick. I'm going to publicly thank Wing Keach for the dates on this, because my understanding from the security services, I'd forgotten the dates. But Wing has put me right on that. Okay, you're looking at 1964 film, Stanley Kubrick. The actual title was How I Learned to Love the Bomb, Dr. Strangelove. What happened was Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a film about an American bomber. He wrote to the CIA and said, "Can I film in one of your bombers?" and was told, "You must be joking." However, when his film came out, they asked to see it before it went public. So he had to send them a copy first. They looked at it and they were gobsmacked. We're talking about what's called back projection. You know when you see two people in a motor car and the streets passing by and there's the street lamp and then the fish and chip shop, and if you watch it long enough, you'll see the same bit coming back again, okay? Well, Stanley Kubrick came up with a revolutionary new design. Now, this is 1964. This is what I have to thank Win Keach for, because I'd forgotten the dates. President Kennedy had said in 1963, was it, we're going to the moon? Right. In 1964, they looked at this and said, "We need you," this is to Stanley Kubrick, "for our false moon mission." 1964, not 1968, Stanley Kubrick worked for the CIA and NASA. As part of the payoff, he was given unlimited budget to make his 2001 film. And as long as he didn't betray what had happened, he would be fine. His last film, Eyes Wide Shut, was considered a betrayal, and you may or may not know that the day before it was to be released, he died. Just like my mother died. That's a fact, and you can check that out. So let's have a look at his back projection. What was so special about it? What he had created was the thousands and thousands of glass beads, all threaded, hanging on string, thousands of them, as a curtain. And then 7 or 8 cameras in an arc taking pictures and projecting an already pre-taken picture onto the back in sharp focus and creating a foreground, an artificial foreground. And this is what he used in 1968 for 2001. So what you're looking at there is a mound of earth, which is a real mound of earth and real animals on it, and also real actors in monkey suits. Behind it is a false picture. You can't see it, but there are thousands and thousands of glass beads hanging on strings. So just to make it clear for you, everything this side of the white line is real, everything the other side of the white line is literally a glass bead screen. One more, there's the actor in a monkey suit, and that's the demarcation. So where do we go with it? Well, on the left-hand side, from the moon mission, and the right-hand side. It's just missing the signature Stanley Kubrick in the bottom corner. What moon mission? Okay, when you have experience of the Illuminati, then you would normally expect to be involved with shadow beings or shadow people, and also jinn. Talk about meal times at home, just to give you an idea. I probably ate food with my mother in all my life 3 times. What would happen on the Saturday and Sunday or in the evenings, I would be called, told it's time to eat. Well, let's start in the morning. Breakfast time. Before breakfast, I get up in the morning, so I'm 7 years old. I go 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, play with my soldiers or my Scale Electrics or whatever I had. I was in my pyjamas. It was not my mother's place to tell me to get dressed. She would come in and give me a cup of tea and toast. I would get dressed when I wanted to. I would then go outside and play at a lovely garden. She would then call out the window, it's lunchtime. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, I'd come in, I would sit in the sitting room, I would be given a plate of food, my mother would then go into the kitchen and eat her food, I ate on my own. I was not permitted to take my plate back to the kitchen, I had to wait, my mother would come out of the kitchen, collect my plate, take it back, I would then go outside and play until 6 o'clock in the evening, my mother would call out the window, it's tea time, I would come in, go and sit in the sitting room, she'd bring my meal, I'd sit, she'd go into the sitting room, she would eat her food, she'd come back and I'd play. If I wanted to watch any television, she would not watch it with me unless it was educational. That's how it was. Did my mother love me? She cared for me. She had a job to do. Her job was to look after me. Did I love her? I appreciated everything she did for me. This is a shadow being, my drawing, probably 1965, something like that. I didn't call it a shadow being when I was that young. To me, he was my smoke man, because he appeared to have smoke continually coming off his body, but it never actually went anywhere. It just sort of came off his body and just always the same. It was really, really weird. Just sort of eyes and spikes, what appeared to be spikes on his head. And we have a greeting. The first drawing on the left-hand side is him outside the window, and I give a signal. I have to show him that the coast is clear. I hold my arms out to the side. He can't do it very well. He's sort of floating. These creatures look like rags or a black bin bag floating. And if you saw them side on, they're as thin as paper. So fine, he comes through the window doesn't smash, the window doesn't wobble, nothing. And he glides, doesn't walk, just glides in and holds his hands up as a recognition. It's part of a key lock system. Through your DNA, you are linked with these creatures so that nobody else can hack in and intercept or involve themselves in that training. This is a training program. This creature, the energy beings like this often work with children because the frequency is so high of these creatures. And children who are not yet sucked into the mind control of this matrix that we live in can respond very free and easy to that type of frequency. That's why those creatures are used. We don't have time, this is not the alien talk, but he was attempting to get me to predict the future. So yeah, and that was in Brighton about 1965, and that's my bedroom. This is not my drawing. This is a drawing of somebody who his father works for one of the Rothschild, and I met this young woman 3 times. Last year she came over from another country. Her dad was a governor of a city, owner of a football club, a millionaire, and a high-ranking Mason, and worked for one of the Rothschilds. And she was afflicted with gin. I managed to get rid of that for her. But that's her drawing of a gin. If you think of Peter Pan, you should really not think of Tinkerbell as a fairy. You should think of Tinkerbell as a djinn. Okay? That is how a djinn would appear if it wanted to not frighten you. Those of you who understand the Bible, King Solomon controlled a jinn and got the jinn to help him to build his temple. If jinn gets angry, it doesn't quite look like that, but we won't go into that now. Books I had to read, never mind at school, H.G. Wells, but only the science fiction ones, so I couldn't read the history of Mr. Polly or anything like that. Edgar Allan Poe, I had to read that. So Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, I had to read those. Asterix, I had to read those with my grandparents. I brought 2 to show you, because they are full of satanic images. And it's incredible. And during the break, we must have a break, I've got them here, and I've marked them, and you can actually see the satanic imagery going on. So that was my grandparents' house. When I went there, I had to read those books. Rupert annuals. I had to read Rupert. One of the reasons is that a guy who illustrated them for many years, a guy called Burstall, had alien experiences and weaved them into his Rupert stories. Again, I haven't brought one, but Chariots of the Gods, I had to read that. No devil books allowed. The Bible wasn't allowed either, but astrology books were, and non-satanic magic books were allowed. Right, okay, television. There's nothing unusual in a boy or a girl watching these. What is unusual is the manner in which I had to watch them. 1 asterisk means it was important but not overly so. 2 asterisks is meant that my mother would sit with me while this was being watched. We weren't allowed to eat food, drink or talk. We had to watch the programme. An M means my mother initiated it, a G means my grandparents. So with Star Trek, the original episodes, the very first one, I was patched off to my grandfather's who had a big colour telly, and I watched the first one there. Likewise, UFO, the programme, the UFO, the very first one, off to my grandparents to watch it there. What my mother said of the very first one, she said the very first one is the best one because it's realistic. All the rest are nonsense because she said UFOs don't travel like that. But that's the UFO story, won't go into that. So that's the type of films. We're going to just talk a little bit about them. Stingray, one we had to watch, and that's where the Earth government forms a secret service to fight reptiles who live under the sea. And on the right here with the hero, we've got a character called Marina, and I asked my mother, oh, is she a mermaid? Because she could breathe underwater. And my mother said, no, she's half human and half reptile. That's why she can breathe under the water. Didn't use the word hybrid, but very clearly telling me this was a half human, half reptile creature. Very interesting, 1965. Doctor Who, one of the episodes I had to watch was Doctor Who and the Silurians, 1970. Reptiles living under the earth. 1971, a devil one. And here's dear old Roger Delgado, during that filming, doing the devil sign. Totally appropriate. It's a program about devil worship. Role models. Okay. There were 2 men in my life, all on the screen. You're looking at Danger Man, Patrick McGowan, and on the right, Richard Bradford playing Man in a Suitcase. I was told that Richard Bradford is too rude and pushy, and it's what I will become if I'm not careful. So I'm told that's me, but that's what I will become. Can I, Dave, ask to pass these around when I'm doing my talk? Right, so there's Richard Bradford. You probably don't even know Man in the Suitcase. If you ever get a chance to see some of them on YouTube, and have a watch that. But that's what I was told by my mother that I'm in danger of becoming. However, my grandfather, who worked with the CIA a lot, really liked this. My grandfather wanted me to become like him. So Richard Bradford. Interestingly, it's not quite a Masonic floor he's on there, but it'll do. My mother said, if you grow up like this man, I will be very pleased. This is Patrick McGowan. Absolutely no reptile in this actor at all. Totally non-reptilian, apart from the usual R-brain that most people have. And this was the man that I had to watch every time I was on television. And I was told, you have to grow up like him. If you're not sure of the programs, he worked for MI5, a secret organisation. All of these characters worked for some form of secret organisation, and that's why I had to watch them. Patrick McGowan went on in 1967-68 to make a program called The Prisoner, and my mother's handler at the time, Paul Dunlop, said to her, you are going to make sure that he's going to watch this, aren't you? And it was on late. I think it was on at 9 o'clock, which was pretty late, and I would have been, what, a 7-year-old boy, 8-year-old boy? And I'd usually go to bed by 9, but I was allowed, well, I was told I had to watch this. Interestingly enough, on the credits, when it opens up, you see a guy sitting behind a desk. That's actually George Markstein. He worked for MI5 in the war period, and he actually created a safe house in Scotland to hide spies in. He became a very close friend of Patrick McGowan, and between the two of them, they created the Prisoner program. That is actually the man, not an actor. That's George Markstein, and he just has the credits on the opening scenes. Okay. If you're familiar with The Prisoner, how many of you are? Great. Is that really an Undertaker, or is it a man in black? The hat looks Undertaker-ish, but I suppose if it's a very sunny day, the Undertaker might wear sunglasses. But here's where it all pretense goes. This is episode 4. You're now getting the feeling for this program. That's very clearly an Illuminati symbol. And here is a publicity shot. And if you look very carefully, Patrick McGowan's hand here, we have the devil sign. And in case you think it's just chance, the guy here is showing by pointing. You have to do that in Illuminati. You have to show. So that is the finger point there. But then that's what I would expect. All right, that's the male identified. I need now to find a female. What is the perfect female? I have to be told what that is. Do you know what television show this is? Fantastic, well done, brilliant. This is the role model for me. My mother said very clearly, this is the person that you must find. Okay, let's talk about Illuminati wordplay. Yeah, it gets better. Okay, publicly they will say, the TV company, they will say that they wanted a character with man appeal. Man appeal. Okay, that publicly go that far. Right. So we've got M appeal. If you think of masochism and sadism, M appeal. So we've got the M. Okay. So we call it M appeal. There's our M appeal. We need an S. So we can either have as Miss or Mrs. But we're going to be really risque back in 1964-65, and we'll have a Mrs. We'll have a Mrs. Being with this man, John Steed. Very, very risque. So we've got a Mrs. M appeal. So look, we've got the S and the M now, but we need to refine that a little bit. We lose the E, turn it into an M, we've got that. Now, why is this important? Satanic masters don't use S&M, they use BDSM. I'm not going to labour on this too long, but for those of you who don't know, it could mean several things: bondage, discipline, submission, masochism. It is an integral part of all Illuminati masters, whether they're satanist or not. And BDSM is the style of sexual choice between somebody who's an Illuminati male and female. 1966, there was one of the Avengers show called A Touch of Brimstone, and Emma Peel played the Queen of Sin. Go and get this actually on YouTube. Interestingly enough, when it was first aired to the censors in Britain, they cut the whipping scene. Emma Peel gets whipped. They cut it just to one crack of the whip, because British censors back in those days, being very upper class, were looking for anything that was against God, any swear words, or any nudity. Unlike their American counterparts who understood what was going on. Do you know the Americans banned this particular show, The Avengers, for 20 years. For 20 years they banned it, and you'll see why. Because the British just don't get it. Okay, what my mother said, this is from the show, if you meet a girl like that, I will be very happy. So this is from that particular episode. She stands with a snake. Of course she stands with the snake because it's reptilian. She has a collar around her neck. What I think you might find surprising, this is the only costume that she designed herself. Every other time the wardrobe for the company designed it, no, she designed this costume herself. She knew what she wanted to wear. And it was called A Touch of Brimstone, and here's a screenshot. This is Peter Wingard there, very, very devil-like. We are really talking the satanic powers now. And her great many fans, and I don't want to detract from them because, you know, they can't see her as a slave, they see her as a dominatrix, as a very powerful woman, and she was throughout all of the episodes except this one. Because if you're into BDSM, as the Illuminati masters are, your female is called a slave. And your female wears a collar around her neck. Now this is interesting because this is predating punk by a good number of years, and she's designed that. That's really fascinating. And it's got a lead, I call the word leash, it's got a lead of chains. We know it's a collar because a master holds his slave on a chain lead or a leather leash. So she wears a collar with a D-ring, can have 2 or 3 D-rings on it, and it has a chain, and then he holds her, and it's a sign of ownership. So they're just larking about here. So that is a true slave. I did a bit of research. I'm not a researcher, but I had to do this, and I found the school she went to is a very interesting school, the Moravia School with the Crusaders' Cross. Very, very interesting school. I won't say any more than that in a moment. I don't know if that's Lady Gaga or somebody else, but there she is. There's the Illuminati stand behind. She's doing the 666, and there's dear old Diana Rigg doing the 666 from that show. So we've got all the symbology in there that we need for the Satanism. Okay, so to meet them, my grandfather took me out to meet these people, not together, separately, late 60s, probably 68. One of the visits to my grandfather, West Worthing Station, got on a train, goes to Victoria. It's about an hour and a half. There was a chauffeur-driven limousine. It was actually a Rolls-Royce at Victoria Station. In those days you could park actually in the station, you can't now. And it was about a 15-20 minute drive to what I'd take to be a TV Studios, where I met Patrick McGowan. Patrick McGowan was at a party, and he was filming Ice Station Zebra at the time, and he actually was in character for me. So I was a small boy, that's sort of 68. I was what, 9 years old. So he was actually in character for me, and it was really, really wonderful that was arranged. Got some more pictures to put around for you. And those are going around now. Let's have a quick look while we talk. So this was the man that I was supposed to role model myself on, and that was the woman that I was supposed to become involved with. Those were my ideals. That's where I was imprinted with values. Before my mother's death in 1979, she foretold of a new actor. This is 1979. She told me there would be a new actor who would be a box office smash. He would play a sword and sorcery role. He would be a robot, and he would then go on to be the next president of the United States of America. We are talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. He did not become the President of America, but he became nearly the President of America, because if you are Governor of California, you are the second most powerfulest person in America from an office point of view. The budget of California is the biggest of any of the states. It's a bit like the top man in Britain democratically is Cameron, the second is Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson is the Mayor of London, which is a multi-billion-pound organisation. So although he wasn't the president, he very nearly became the president. So my mother, 2.5 years before he hit the office, had already been told through the Illuminati circles, we have identified this man is going to, we're going to use the media, Hollywood, to build him up, just like we did Ronald Reagan, and then we're going to use him and get him to be our president. So he was chosen and identified. This is a stunt shot with George Bush Sr. behind and a younger looking man in the front. Okay, so he was already identified. If you've seen my talks before and you know the 9/11 talks, you'll be very familiar with this. This is a screenshot from Terminator 2, and if you remember the shot, John Connor has just been rescued by the T2 robot, put onto a motorbike, and it's been chased by the liquid metal robot, and then you see a bridge, and it says, caution, 9/11. Well, we all know that means 9 foot 11 inches, don't we? Except we don't. You must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the Illuminati have to, under magical rules, tell you what they're going to do before they do it. But they can't tell you in a way that makes it obvious, because then you'll do something about it. So they have to tell you. So here was your warning. This was 1991. 10 years before it happened, and it tells you, caution, 9/11. We're going to look at some more in case you think that's just chance. On the left-hand side, we've got Gremlins 2, 1990, and on the right-hand side, The Simpsons, 1997. So if you look at the radio mics, one radio station is Radio 9, the other station is Radio 11. If you look at Lisa Simpson, she's telling you it's $9 to go on a coach tour around New York. Okay, that's actually telling you what's going to happen. Here we go, is another one. A Problem Child, 1990, 9/11, circled it for you just in case you missed it. And then Independence Day, 1996, when he's got the countdown, 9 minutes and 11 seconds. Okay, well, what else can we learn? If we think that Arnold Schwarzenegger's very much in with them, what can we learn? David, one more, please. Have a look at this picture. It's going to come round, but that's okay. It's a bit dark on here, I'm afraid, but have a look at this picture. You would have to be involved with the Illuminati to know that the sign on the mudguard is an Illuminati symbol. Okay? And we'd expect at a party to see such a sign on a door, which means I can go and have free sex. There'll be a woman in there for me. So that's what that symbol means. Okay? If you look at the car, the tyre is complete, and yet it seems to be pretty rough fire there, doesn't there? Look at that picture very carefully, very quickly. I don't want to spoil any 9/11 talks, but we have to do it because it's part of the Illuminati. Here we go. Picture from 9/11. It's a police vehicle. Notice that the front, where it's been burnt, is just at the engine block and is highly rusted. Here's another picture. Coca-Cola van. The engine block at the front is highly burnt, incredibly rusted. Look at the picture that's coming round. That's a fire, yet that car that Arnold Schwarzenegger is looking at is completely rusted. Here's your clue. It's your Illuminati clue. Alright, was thermite used or something else or both? Big arguments raging at the moment and have been for a number of months, whether the Twin Towers were destroyed with thermite explosive or something else. And this picture shows very clearly ejections of material from the right-hand side and the centre, which show you absolutely without question that charges were used. However, belt and braces job. If I want to bring a building down, I'll use everything to make sure I bring it down. Let's talk about space-based weapons for a minute. This is a real pin badge. It's not one that's been made up. This is worn by the military. Air Force Space Command. Why does the Air Force have a space command? Gary McKinnon, the guy who was nearly extricated to America, was on the trail of this. He wanted to know why the United States Air Force had a space command. And he was deliberately looking into that when he hacked into the Pentagon and nearly cost him his life. Not just his sanity, his life. This is not a trick photograph, this is a real photograph of a United States aircraft, and on the front is a laser device. That is an aeroplane that can fire a laser beam. Possibly not around the globe, but within a few miles. Here is a military patch. If we get time, we're running out of time. If we get time, we're going to look at these. Here's a military patch worn by the military showing Space-Based Warfare Center. Okay, alien experiences. Okay, terminology. Extraterrestrial, to me, means an alien creature that has spent a number of years in space, travelled from a planet and has arrived here. I have no problem with that. Extra-dimensional entities, these are another form of creature which don't travel hundreds and hundreds of years or hundreds of thousands of trillions of miles. They walk through a portal and can appear from another dimension. Interdimensional entities, those creatures that live between the third and the fourth dimension, such as a jinn. There's a jinn, interdimensional entity. These are the ones that the Illuminati Dark Masters can conjure up. So jinns can actually be conjured up. You need an iron ring to conjure them up. We won't go into that, we just don't have the time. What time do we finish, Dave? Have we? Well, I can keep going. Right. If you do any research on it, you're told that if you have to conjure a jinn, you need an iron ring. That's bullshit. Jinn will only respond to a person whose bloodline goes right back through to Egyptian, Sumerian, whatever times. The ring is purely and simply so that the entity feels it's not bowing down to humanity. Okay? It's rather like the British prisoners in the Japanese war camp, and it's a true story. The captain licked a postage stamp of the Queen. You must have heard the story. Stuck it under the commandant's table, and every time he went into this Japanese colonel's office, he was forced to bend down. But he survived and kept his mind because he said, I'm bending down to the Queen, because he'd stuck a postage stamp on. It's exactly the same thing. Jinn will only serve mankind or humankind if that person has that link back through the generations. But the entity will say, I'm serving the ring. Jinn and the Illuminati hand in glove. Abduction, obviously taken without your conscious agreement. Contact, someone comes as a jolly old chat with you. I don't feel I fall into either of those two categories. I certainly am not abducted because I have a clear memory of agreeing to let them do it. Contact case, the best one I would think would be Alex Collier. It's where he gets taken and they give him news and advice and chat to him, but mine's not as happy as that. So mine's somewhere in between those two. How are people taken? I'm often asked that. People can be physically taken. Your body, 1 minute your body's there, 1 minute it's not. For every 10 times I'm taken, maybe only once is a physical take. It's extremely difficult for them to do that. You can be detected, or they can be detected, things can go wrong, and it requires an awful amount of energy. The better way is to take your soul or your energetic signature. For those people who have practiced astral travelling, your energy can be taken, your body can still survive for a limited period of time. If we accept that a lot of these entities don't breathe oxygen, why should they breathe oxygen? If we assume they don't breathe oxygen, they can't take you physically into their environment, but they can take you energetically. Some of the greys don't breathe at all. They are just automated bodies, don't need to breathe anything. So what are you? What makes you you? Are you really a physical being in the physical world? And all I'd ask you to do is just think for a moment that your physical bodies are not the be-all and end-all. In the Eastern religions, they actually are far closer to it than we are. We've forgotten about reincarnation, we've forgotten about the soul coming out and going around. To us it's mixed in with goblins, ogres and fairies. And I can assure you that's not the case. Okay, lies, lies and more damn lies. Well, the Illuminati need to lie to you. This is brilliant. I worked this out myself. I'm very proud of it because when I checked the National Geographic website, We only disagreed by 30 seconds. Here we go. All right, the official building of the pyramids. Apparently, this is the official line. 36,000 people were actually dragging the stones to the pyramid. 10,000 people were actually quarrying the stone. So that's a total of 46,000 people in total. The Egyptian government is very clear to say these were not slaves, they were artisans. There are 2.3 million blocks in the Great Pyramid. 2.3 million blocks. Each block weighs 2.5 tons. In actual fact, some of the granite blocks weigh from 8 to 15 tons, but we'll just have that. 2.3 million individual blocks, and each block weighing 2.5 tons. It took, according to the official figures, 20 years to build. Well, we can do the maths, can't we? Shall we do the maths? Right, 20 years divided by 2.3 million blocks means 115,000 blocks had to be cut, transported and laid every year. Right? There are 365 days in a year, so let's assume they worked every day, no days off. That's 115,000 blocks divided by 365, which means that 315 blocks had to be cut from the quarry, transported from the quarry, and laid a day. Oh, we can do even better than this. Let's make them work a 17-hour day. All right, with no breaks, no lunch, nothing. So, assuming a 17-hour day, 5 a.m. in the morning until 10 p.m., 315 blocks divided by 17 means 18 and a half blocks had to be laid per hour. Right, do even better than this. There are 60 minutes in 1 hour. 60 minutes divided by 18 and a half blocks mean that one block had to be laid in the pyramid every 3 minutes and 2 seconds for 20 years. It is impossible. It can't be done. And if you look on the National Geographic website, they actually say 2.5 minutes. They're actually 30 seconds tougher than I am. How could it be done? And yet, the thing is, people don't question it, because if I was an Egyptologist, the greatest thing in my life would be to go and work in the Cairo Museum, to be allowed to dig around there. And if I come up with anything that is contrary to the official line, I will never be allowed to do that. And that's why Egyptologists know this is all bullshit, but they go along with it because they've got a pension at the end of the day. Right, Draconis reptilians, the R word. My drawing, I'm a small boy, and I say to this creature, "Hello, Daddy." The reason I call him Daddy is because he's told me I am your daddy. And he says to me, "You who call me father." And he says, "Yep, you're my son, I made you." I'll talk about that in a bit. I'll just say, "Are you happy?" And he says, "I'm pleased." Well, I bumped into this artist. He's in America. His name is David Chase, and he's like a forensic artist. And it took 3 months to get this next rendition up. I'm going to show you the drawing. He would send me a drawing of a claw, and I would say, "No, it's not the right shape," I'd go back. Then he might send me a picture of an arm, and I said, "No, it's not right." In the end, we did it, and we both got copyright on this. I'm very, very grateful to David Chase for this. This is the White King, and this is the rendition of him. Those are not spines as such, they are residual wings. They're too big. But when you're a small boy and you see these things, they seem to sort of dominate in your mind. No tummy button. I don't have tummy buttons, and no visible groin area. 5 fingers. I'm not going to tell you too much about it because I have to protect myself. Often people come up to me and say, "Oh, I've seen the reptiles." And I'll say, "How well have you seen them?" And they might say, "Well, you know, I get along with them and I've seen them for years." And I might ask them a few questions, because if they can't come back with the answers that I think are right, then I'll just treat them with a little bit of caution. One of the big questions I ask people who profess to see these creatures is, how do they walk? How do they walk? And if you really have seen these creatures, you will know how they walk, and they don't walk like humans. All right, mission patches. In Britain, Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, that's about it. We have badges and stuff like that. The Americans, absolutely mad keen. Every serviceman and servicewoman will have a badge. It's the official Apollo 11 badge. The Eagle has landed. Hence the Eagle has landed. We saw that picture of the airborne laser, but this is in space, and it shows a snake firing a laser beam at a missile. That's not what I want to show you. I want to talk about the snake. Why have they chosen the snake? Okay, mission patch number 1, snake. I've got these. I'm going to show them to you when we have a break. I brought them with me. Why have we got a dragon holding the earth? Why have we got 3 snakes around the earth? And in Latin it says, never before, never again. Never has the earth been free, never will it be free again. You have to make sure the earth is free, actually. This one is a dragon and a snake with the earth, and omni vestri substructio means all your underground bases belong to us. That's what it says. All your underground bases belong to us. And for those of you who know what underground bases are, interesting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, and the 6th star means Area 51. So we can't say Area 51, but they'll always donate it with stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Area 51. So we know exactly where this special operations group are based. And as I say, there's a snake and a dragon there. Why have we got Uncle Sam, that's the eagle, with one hand holding the earth and one hand holding the snake? What it's saying is the reptiles, the snake and the earth are one. And very interesting, if you can take a look at Uncle Sam's stars and stripes, there are only 2 states. Can you see? 2 stars. One is the United States and one is everybody else. New World Order. 2 governments. America and everybody else. Interesting that. NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. Here's one. This is a photo rendition of one. Couldn't get the original one. And this is a wizard. 5 stars and something coming out of the middle one. On the right, that says, get back if you're not initiated. The one on the left was changed. It says the original one, which I've got, is classified flight test. These are all official. They have to be passed by the American government, and then they realised they shouldn't have done that. They've changed it now, and it now says to serve mankind. The Latin underneath, and to upset you, but the Latin underneath translates loosely as tastes like chicken. What tastes like chicken? Us or them? So you've got a grey alien. If grey aliens don't exist, why is there an official mission patch with an alien, a grey alien on it? Unbelievable. Okay, it's one of my drawings that I've done. I want you to look at the sword. I showed this about 2 years ago at a conference, and somebody said, I got something you might be interested in. I had to drive down the M1 from where I live and meet this guy, and he didn't want any money for it. He gave it to me. So this is the White King with his white sword, and this is what I was given. The official line here is that the White Knight is attacking the dragon. That's rubbish, because in Illuminati alien parlance, to place your hand on the head of anything means you're mine. We are one. Not attacking it at all. And what we've got here is a white sword and a white king. And you've got 1V in Roman numerals. Area 51. 5 stars. So we have Area 51, we have the white king, the white reptile with his white sword, and a big dragon. The symbology is incredible. And on the right hand side it says silence and vengeance. Don't talk. White king, white sword. Here was another one I was given. Snake, white snake, red eyes, white sword. Why would you have a snake as your symbol? Why do snakes and dragons come up time and time and time again? Okay, you may be familiar with these pictures. They're evidence, that's why I always show them. On the left-hand side, that's me before initiation into a reptilian ceremony. On the right-hand side, a complete changed boy. In fact, so changed that I said to my mother I wanted my hair the other way. And I'm afraid I'm a very arrogant, self-opinionated. There's about 6 months between the two here. And at that stage in my life, I was very superior, very arrogant, because I'd been around creatures which were far superior to anything else. And when you're a small boy, you tend to copy what you see. This is one of the creatures that I saw. He has the truly sacred standard, which is appears to be a metal pole. It has emblems on it which relate to what we call the wings from home. The lightning bolts at the side relate to the White Queen and her daughters, the king on the top. It's all symbolic, and the reptile holding the pole has a double white sash. White is the sacred colour, and if you look at his mouth, they have to project mentally and physically imagery, and he has to project a face full of thunder. That's the best I can translate it into English. So he has to pull that face. You never smile at these ceremonies because these creatures can't smile. So let's have a look at my wedding. In 1965, as a 5-year-old boy, I was asked to go to a wedding and be a page boy. To cut the long story short, to me, it was a ceremony. It is a ceremony, but I didn't see it as a church ceremony. I saw it as a ceremony with the reptiles, and that's why next to the 2 bridesmaids, I don't smile, because you don't smile when you're with them and you're in a ceremony. It caused a huge amount of consternation because the page boy wouldn't smile. In my mind, I outranked these 2. You think about it. You go in the church. There's the bride. I hold the bride's train. The most important person there is the bride. I must be second most important in my mind because I'm behind her. Behind me are the bridesmaids. So in my mind, I outrank these 2. So when they ask me to smile, I don't. However, the bride in the middle asks me to smile, and I then go into some form of confusion because you're not supposed to smile at these ceremonies, but she outranks me, and she's asked me to smile. And the tall bridesmaid on the left is basically saying, thank God, in the ears that at last he's smiling, because the cameraman was doing his nut because he wasn't smiling. So I got a half smile. My reward for being a page boy was to go to Butlins in 1965. My mother came up to me with a camera and said, smile. I can't smile. So I do that because that's what I've seen others doing. Okay? The one on the right you've seen, the one on the left you haven't. They both share the Earth surrounded by a grid. It's called an energy grid. Please don't confuse this with the natural ley lines, the natural energy that runs through the Earth. This is a grid that traps people. Okay, I'm going to perhaps talk about things that you have not come across. You know, if you don't agree with me or you find it's too bizarre, that's fine. Let's not have an argument about it. Imagine that your physical bodies are not the be-all and end-all. Imagine what really counts is what's inside you, your soul, your energy, what makes you you. I know it's very difficult for humans to let go when a loved one dies. We go back on a regular basis and we put flowers at the graveside, or if someone tragically died on the road, we go and put flowers down. Humans can't let go. You live in a physical world. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, it can't be real, you can't believe it. You guys are different because you're searching for the truth. But the vast majority of humans cannot see that because if it's not physical. But just imagine that something inside you is more important. And when your physical body dies, this inside you tries to go back to source. You can call it heaven if you want. But an energy grid around the planet prevents that going back to source, and you're forced back into another body. So you are eternally trapped for millennia. Those of you who have seen and can remember that wonderful film, The Matrix. They don't propose that you're all sitting in pods, dreaming, and your static electricity or natural electricity is being drained. But what I am saying to you is that you are prisoners on this planet. And this is an official badge on the left, and he's a knight, which is the Knights Templar, the Illuminati, standing there, and he's defenders of the domain. The earth is the domain, and you aren't coming out. On the right-hand side, the one I showed you, shows again the earth with the energy grids around it. This is the real battle. I'll give you my email address, and if you want to talk more about it, then that's fine. Right. I have to talk about this because it's really important for me. Very first memories, in my cot, two strange hands coming down to pick me up. You'll all be familiar with this, you'll have seen this on YouTube, I'll fly through it. But it's my first one. I can't remember his body, just been picked up as a small boy, looking into his eyes. And that was the moment that contact was made, basically. My 1971 experience, which Dave Hodrin was very, very supportive and very helpful. In fact, it was Dave who said to me, draw everything down. And in those days I was drawing it down to help me to remember. I never dreamt that I would be standing in front of an audience actually showing these drawings. That's where they don't come out so well, because they're just done with pencil. I never assumed it, and I remember one person saying, well, do them again in black pen. But no, that would be wrong. That would be copying. This is the ones I did at the time. And these ones, need to stay. So even if they're a bit difficult sometimes to see and the writing's crap, that's for me as a history, and they need to stay. I saw this craft with 5 other children, 1971, for about 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, something like that. And then as soon as it disappeared over the horizon, then a red biplane with 3 enormous cameras on it, at literally treetop level. And I always remember hearing the propellers, looking at this wonderful red aeroplane, the pilot with a flying cap and goggles, and I saw it come over, and at that time I had no memory of it over my head. I had no memory of it flying after. All I can remember is being taken up, and a school. There was a school up there. Incredible. And the next thing I know, I'm sort of talking with all the girls from the 2 houses, and we're walking back, and I said, what do you think that was? And they said, oh, it's a shooting star. And I thought, well, no, it wasn't. I said, well, what about the red aeroplane? Nobody saw the red aeroplane. And I said, well, what about the schools up there? Nobody saw the school up there. The only person who took it seriously was my mother, and just like Dave Hodrin, my mother said to me, draw it all down and I'll show the people I work with. So I drew courage to draw my drawings that I remember at that time, and then she showed them. She was the only one, she's just very matter of fact about it. Yeah, draw it, that's what you saw. The other group of girls, their dad was a strict Catholic, and it was terrible for him, he couldn't cope with it. The other family were Greek, and they just sort of laughed it off. But my mother said to me, well, yeah, that's what you saw. And what I saw was a room very much like an open plan office. That's a window, it looks like a domino. There's the windows behind. Set series of tables, and the table second from the right has children about 5 years old. All the children there are female. I was the only boy. And those children have just been taken from the earth, and as a result of which they have to be deprogrammed from the education they've received. So they have crayons and paper, because that's what they're used to. When they make a transformation, I don't understand what that would be, they move to the table to the right, where they then wear these things around their necks, which they call PEDs. PEDs, Personal Educator Device. Now, listen, we've got laptops and iPods. It doesn't seem amazing, but in 1971, I'd never seen anything like this. And they all wear them, or wore them with, like, I don't know whether it was a chain or a thread around their neck. And I said to this girl here, who came up to me immediately I arrived, and she said, I'm to wait with you till you're going to be collected. And I said, why are they wearing these things around their necks? And she said, because they're children, and they'll lose them if they don't. And I said, what do? And she said to me, they teach us. And I said, what do they teach us? And the reply was, everything. Twice during the conversation, she told me off for speaking with my mouth. Use your mind. And what she said to me was, you can use hand gestures to reinforce something, providing you're speaking with your mind. But you mustn't use your mouth. So that was basically a school, and the guy that a researcher might refer to now as a Nordic, he was clearly the class teacher, and all I can remember, his face looked like he'd taken flour and put flour on his face. It was so white, and his eyes were blue, and his hair was parted down the middle and it was long. He was very kind, very gentle, very angelic. And each table had a female, which I think was human, a helper. And as a boy, I would have been, 11 and a half, I call this the school in the air, because I imagined it was just off the ground. But later when I was chatting to Mary Rodwell, a researcher in Australia, and she'd had many counts of children saying this, she said, no, that's a school in space. But I had no feeling. You don't get in a lift, you can always feel it moving. I had no feeling of movement at all there. I just thought we were just above the trees. Okay, so this is the most sacred moment for me. The girl says to me, he's coming for you now. And she walks off, and this being walks along, and I become hysterical because I suddenly realise I'm alone. Nobody takes any notice of me. He just comes straight up, puts his two hands on my shoulder and says what it says there. Would you like to be like us, to have knowledge and understanding, to see the future and know the past, to have power and that word that's missed out is authority. And I did actually shout out with my mouth. I was so excited that I said yes, because I really did want to know about the past and I wanted to know about the future. Now researchers refer to this as a soul agreement. In other words, I agreed to let them abduct me, but then it's not abduction because I've agreed to it. Mind you, with these things, give them an inch and they'll take a mile. I didn't say they could do this, that and the other, but clearly that agreement, they feel they can. I couldn't stand here today if they'd hurt me. If they'd hurt me, I'd have to be a very, very brave person to stand here and tell you that. They've only ever treated me well. And as a result of that, it's easier for me to talk to you like this. For every one person who stands in front of you and says that they're having a happy time, there will be 30, 40 people who are not having a happy time. So let's be under no illusion here. For some reason, I am not harmed. I know I'm not harmed because when I come back, I'm not like that. Because they could give you a false impression in your mind and make you think you've been on a desert island and had a lovely time. But your body doesn't lie. Because if you're standing there and you're sweating and you're shaking, then something's very wrong. I don't have that, so I'm not having a hard time. One of the things that I do, I'm taking up a tall metal pole, I don't know how high this thing is, and there are hundreds and hundreds of creatures which I now would call hybrids, drawn up around. At the time, I didn't know what the word hybrid was, and all I said to the creature was, look at all those creatures down there, because they weren't human. And he holds my arm and he pulls it up so high, I'm actually pulled up and I'm on tiptoe, because these things are quite tall. They're quite tall, so I'm pulled up like that. And then they all raise their hands in salute. Do you remember the drawing I showed you of the shadow being with the hands up? Seems to be a theme with them. This was 1971 still. I was away for 2 days, and I was away for 2 days because I had to sleep. This is what appears to be a control room. I don't think it's a control room. I call it the decision-making deck. The decision-making deck was purely a test. And I was sat in that chair and subjected to quite a range of interesting things, and I had to make decisions. And this was one of the times the only time in fact, where I can remember humans being present. 5 humans, 1 woman, 4 men, all in white coats, in the right hand side operating what I would consider very old-fashioned machines. Machines with tape spools going round, cables on the floor as thick as your leg. The machines were the hot heat, you could feel them, there were fans going. And then this side of the room, completely different technology. No switches, no lights, no nuts and bolts, completely different. I would say to you that if you looked at this side of the room, everything appeared to have grown, literally grown out of the floor. There wasn't like we put furniture around. And at the end of it, physically lifted up and held in the air. Mary Rodwell had a case in Australia with a young boy. His parents were very, very distressed, and he reported the same thing. So with my permission, she showed my YouTube video to this woman, and I was able, through Mary Rodwell, to assist the parents to understand that their 7-year-old boy was not insane. Here was a 50-year-old man. What's Australia? 3,000 miles away, I don't know. Never been to Australia in my life, never met this 7-year-old boy, yet he was describing exactly the same creatures doing exactly the same thing to him. So I was able to use my experiences to actually help a family in Australia, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to do that. Okay, anybody seen this picture before? My birthday card? Few of you, okay. I'm sending round the original card, and inside is a photograph of me at the same time so that you can see that's me. Okay, a couple of years back now, a couple of Christmases, we had a new shop called Card Factory opened in Whitby, and Whitby is a very small town of 12,000 people. So when a new shop opens, you know about it. And my wife said to me, let's go and get some cheap wrapping paper for next Christmas because there are going to be some discounts. So I went down in January. I hate busy shops, I hate lots of crowds of people, I really don't do that. So she was rummaging around, getting what she wanted, and I stood in the corner, found a nice quiet place like that, next to a carousel, and I looked to my left, and I saw that in the carousel. Are you allowed to swear here or not? Right. And I picked it up, and I looked at it, and I said to my wife, what am I doing on a birthday card? And she said, what? Because she was busy. I said, what the fuck am I doing on a birthday card? So she looked at it and she just, I don't know. I was so shocked. I took the card, I went up to the woman and paid for it. And she said, don't you want your envelope? And I said, no. I said, that's me on there and I'm not happy about it. So she looked and said, oh yeah, it's you. I said, yeah, but I'm not happy about that. I don't know about that. And I went home and for 3 hours I just sat. I'm not usually lost for words. 2 or 3 hours, just sat in my chair at home, look at this card, thinking, what am I going to do? I've got no memory of this. So, right, I need to go and see my solicitor, Mr. Jeffries, at North Yorkshire Law. So I went down to see Mr. Jeffries at North Yorkshire Law, my solicitor, and he said, oh, you've got a tough one here because this is intellectual property. There are only 3 solicitors in England who can deal with this. 3. 1 in Newcastle and the other 2 where you would expect in London. He said, but I tell you what, he said, this is England, and the laws are quite strict, so you'll actually gain more. He said, I know I'm losing money for the profession, but you'll actually gain more if you talk directly to the managing directors of these firms, because the law in England on this is very strict. Fine. So I got hold of the managing director of Card Factory. He's the managing director of the company that owned those shops where the cards were in. And I said, look here, I've got this card, I'm on it, I've got no recollection of this, what's going on? So he said, well, hang on a minute, I'll just check this out, because we've bought the photograph from somebody else. As good as his word, 20 minutes later, he phoned me back home and said, okay, we have bought this. It's come from another company called Paper House. Here's the phone number for the managing director for Paper House. Phoned the manager up at Paper House, and he said, same thing, okay, give me 20 minutes, phoned me back and said, oh, I've bought this picture from America. So I said, well, but where's it come from? And he said, well, it's from a company based in America called Photo Library. He said they hold the copyright for all of the cards in England. Nearly all of the cards in England are held in America. He said they're based in Seattle. Right, okay. 5 hour difference between, or 6 hours between England and Seattle. Emailed them, very unhelpful. First thing he said to me was, well, prove that's you. So I said, well, I'll tell you what I can do. I've got a poster of me fighting an election campaign around that time. I can send you the poster. So emailed him the poster the next day, got back to me and said, I've got to take you seriously. So I said, okay, he said, test question then, when was this taken? He said, if that's you, you'll know it. I said, well, the fact is I don't know because I don't remember being there, but I know because of my glasses and the tie I'm wearing, that's going to be 1996. And he said to me, oh, close enough. We've got this down as 1997. He said, right, I'm going to have to investigate this. Okay, 3 days go by. He then writes to me and says, the photograph was taken in Texas. Right, Texas. By a Jewish photographer. I'm Jewish, by the way. And I said, oh, I've never been to Texas. So I said, you're telling me then that's not me in that motor car? And his exact words to me were, oh no, Mr. Parks, I'm not saying that's not you, but the name that I've got for this person is not your name. So I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, absolutely nothing, because English law doesn't touch us. And that was the end of the conversation. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to get the newspapers to phone them, because I want the newspapers giving them a hard time. So I went to my local newspaper, wondering if A, they would cover the story, and B, would they put it on, I don't know, page 3 or page 4. You know what they did? They put it on the front page, and this is before I was elected, okay? Front page, and they phoned up the company in Seattle, and they were just told, no comment, no comment, no comment. Now, the editor of the Whitby Gazette phoned me and said, look, he said, I've researched you, and he said, you're genuine. He said, when somebody gives me no comment, I know they're lying. He said, do you want me to make this national? Because I can. And I said, no, because there's security elements to this. And he said, yeah, you're probably right, but if you change your mind, let me know. So I went back, phoned again to the card factory managing director, and I said, I'm really not happy about this. I said, I'm not a greedy person, but you know what? You could have paid me royalties for my picture on those cards. How many cards did you print? Now, he didn't need to go and check anywhere. He had all this information in front of him. Immediately he came back and he said, no, I said to him, I've bought 7. Because my solicitor had said, go into the shop and buy them all out quickly. And I remember thinking, oh my God, supposing there are hundreds of them, at £1.39 a shot, this is going to cost me a fortune. So I bought 7, that's what's left. And I said to the girl, what have you got in the storeroom? She went into the store and said, there isn't any more. And I thought, oh my God, I've got 7, how many hundreds have gone out there? So I said to the guy, I've got 7. And he said to me, oh, you've bought our entire stock. I said, you only printed 7? And he said, yeah, he said it was a test run to see if it sold well. I said, well, I'm not happy about it. He said, well, we've pulled it anyway. We're not going to print anymore because it was just a test run. I said, how can you possibly know how well a product sells if you only print 7 cards? And his answer to me was, I'm just the managing director. So then I said to him, okay, and these 7 cards with my picture on, of all your stores in England, which stores did you send them to? And he said, just one store, your store. I said, right, let's get this straight. You printed 7 cards with my picture on it, and you sent them to the store where I live. And he said, that's right, it's a small world, isn't it? And then he said, I have to go because I'm a very busy man. So what can we make of this? Clearly, there wasn't a teddy bear there. Something's been airbrushed out. I have no recollection. The car's been identified as a Phantom 4 Rolls-Royce. It's not Texas, because if you look in the picture, I've had the tree identified. It's a northern hemisphere tree. And what I need now is an engineer who's built flyovers, because they could look at the back. There's a flyover in the back of that picture, and I bet you an engineer could say from the construction of that flyover which country that was. It's not Texas. So I have no memory of that. Somebody has got a picture of me, and that's not someone taking a picture through the window. That's a hidden camera. That's taken down from low here. Let's think back to this drawing. Oh, sorry. Think back to the drawing of the creature saying, would you like to be like us? Not, would you like to become us? Would you like to be like us? Supposing it was possible to take a soul out of a human being, place it into an alien being, take the alien soul out and place it into the human being, a sort of an exchange. How interesting, because then that human body could go around and have all the meetings it wants. Nobody would be any the wiser, there would be no problem because it's a human being. And then that human soul would be in an alien body and do an exchange visit and see what life was like from them. That's what it means when it says, would you like to be like us? Heavy stuff, not the sort of stuff you read. So here's a drawing. Imagine that was the case. Here's a drawing of a craft. This is a craft, I call it timeline interception because that's what they call it. If a person's going to be abducted, you know, you don't just turn up and hang about up in space thinking, oh, is Charlie Boy coming out now? It's project management to the nth degree. You have to exactly know where you're going to be, at what time, so many milliseconds past, what have you. You can't just turn up and hope for the best. People who say, oh, I saw a UFO the other day, you were meant to see it. UFOs operate in the infrared spectrum because your human eyes don't see an infrared. That's why when NASA sent all its spacecraft up, they had infrared cameras pointed at the Earth. So if it decloaks, for want of a better word, either A, their machinery is broken down, B, they've forgotten to switch it on, or C, much more likely, you're meant to see it. So here's a nice drawing I've done. The guys on the front are flying the craft. The guys on the left are processing information that is coming up from that control console, from the floor below. The interesting green guy with the medal around his neck, I've drawn him incorrectly actually. His hands should be on the left shoulders of both the entities. Mantids, that creatures, the researchers refer to them as mantid. In America they're called mantis. Willingly have agreed to be chipped by the reptilians, and they carry a chip in their left shoulder. Reptilians are fantastic at microsurgery. And if you place your hand on a living organism that's connected through the chip, you can receive information. Doesn't sound so crazy if you think back to that BT statement in 1995 about putting a chip by your eye so that you can record everything. Doesn't sound so crazy now, does it? And this is the floor below it. The guys, calling them guys, these guys sitting on chairs are doing everything in this quadrant. So 1, 2, 3 standing are doing everything in this quadrant, and these two are coordinating all the information coming from here, and then they send that up to what you just saw at the top. And this is purely and simply calculating when to appear, when to interact, when to abduct someone, and we use the word abduction, to avoid detection, possibly also listening into communications from Earth governments. This could be a lens flare, but even if it is a lens flare, it looks exactly like a non-metallic orb. Has anybody seen anything like that before? Oh, brilliant, Dave. What does anybody think, hazard a guess what that might be? Anybody?
I think so.
Yeah?
Sort of in the paranormal side of things, so tend to sort of say that spiritual energy and something.
That'll do. Imagine that you are an entity living in the fourth dimension and you wish to come into the third dimension. This is a much heavier, compressed dimension. If you're a fourth dimension entity and you send your consciousness through to the third dimension, it will be compressed into a circle. This is a consciousness. Someone's coming to spy on you. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They're coming to have a little look at you. A friend of mine on the internet put his pictures up. This is a very interesting picture. Lots of pictures show things which you don't see with the naked eye. Very interesting creature. I've removed his face, although it's on Facebook. He's pasted it on Facebook. I don't have the right to put his face up, but the creature's there. I want to show you a picture that I was sent a while ago now, which is a creature descending from an aeroplane at a United States Air Force base late at night. The camera's taken picture at a great distance and enhanced. That's the one. It's coming down, whatever they call those things where they wheel the stairs out to the aeroplane. Now, detractors will say this is a weird fish, or it's a model. I was given the copy of this by a guy called Tony Kilvert, who runs the Synchronicity website. It's from South America, and he paid quite a lot of money for this. They were afflicted by a jinn. The drawings you've seen have been drawings of jinn in transdimension coming through from the in-between dimension to ours. And the story goes that the children have been attacked, and that these guys, the adults, created a tripwire. Now, look at the man's face. That is not the face of someone who successfully caught a fish. Look at the children's faces here. Those are not looking at something they find regularly. I would always refer to a jinn in its physical form as like a piranha. So when I was shown this by Tony Kilbert, I had no doubt personally in accepting that as for what it is. As exactly what I would expect it to be when it's in this dimension and it's angry. It's rather dead there. And that's my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, what a superb and detailed lecture there. It's been absolutely fascinating stuff. We've all found that incredibly interesting. Very interesting contact experiences with Simon, and also some great information there about the Illuminati, much of which you might not have heard before. We'll have a 10-minute break now, 10-15 minute break, and then Simon will return with us Q&A to wrap up the evening. I've got a little music video to play, so we'll just have a few minutes just chat and grab yourself a drink if you wish, and then we'll continue with the night.
Through quite quickly. I just take the questions as they come.
Simon, thanks for coming, very enjoyable. I've got two questions, if I may. One is on how you understand the interdimensional domain, how it fits with Gray's, what you described as the jinn, and how that relates to traditional notions of ET. That's the first question.
Can I take that one?
Yeah.
My understanding doesn't actually preclude the traditional understanding of extraterrestrial. Extraterrestrial to me are creatures that live on, let's say, a planet on Orion's belt or near Orion's belt. Let's just call them a grey creature that can get in a spacecraft and come here. Grey creatures don't eat They don't go to the toilet, they don't need to breathe, their bodies are specially designed for spending many years in space. And that is a creature that is as real as you and I and is in the physical world. A creature that comes from the fourth dimension, they can be 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th dimension, but the bad guys are usually in the fourth dimension. A creature from the fourth dimension will either use its mind alone or mind and technology to open a portal and come through here. Okay, so that is an extra dimensional being. That's a being that doesn't live on the Earth, lives in another dimension, which can be another star system, many, many, many billions of miles away. People call it wormholes. I don't like the word, but people understand what I mean if I use the word wormhole. I've got a huge respect for Zecharia Sitchin. I think Sitchin has understood the clay tablets that he found correctly. I just don't believe that the information on them is necessarily true. I do not accept that aliens created humankind. I don't accept that. I believe that aliens tampered with humankind and made humans far less than what they could be. So when humankind were, in my view, in the third dimension, when human consciousness expanded, the jinn were already extant upon the earth, were pushed back by that human consciousness, but couldn't be pushed into the fourth dimension. And so they exist between the third and fourth dimension and have always had a love-hate relationship with mankind. And that's why deals are done between Illuminati black magicians and the jinn creatures. The jinn creatures have a reptilian genetics in them, so they're all part and parcel. Dark masters can pull forth the jinn for their own bidding. So my understanding is that you can quite happily have an extraterrestrial who may be taken 50 years to get here. You can have an extra-dimensional being which took 3 seconds to get here, or you can have an interdimensional being. Does that help?
Yes, it does slightly. Are the greys being sort of used as tools by the interdimensional beings?
There are many different sorts of greys. The grey that Hollywood really bangs out, let's talk about those because they're the ones that people are most familiar with. The correct terminology for their bodies would be doll, not robotic, doll. The eyes have the shields because they spend all their time in space. Okay, they're just looking out through space, so the lenses they have enhance the amount of light so they can see and cut down through the spectrum, and they can see in infrared. They are used. I feel very sorry for the greys. They are trapped in what I call a circle. They can't get out of it. They are chipped. They are servants of a particular group, maybe a number of groups, but the one particular group they serve. And often, you know, when an abductee says that he or she got put back in the garden instead of at home, or my clothes are on back to front, that's the greys sabotaging the program in a very subtle way. Okay, I personally have an experience of seeing humans, 5 humans or 6 humans, in a corridor, in an underground base, just sitting on the floor, and a grey, traditional grey with the almond-shaped eyes just standing there, and saying to the grey, "What are these humans doing here?" And the grey replies, "Sitting down," which is what they are doing, but it's plain sitting down. So I said, "Why are the humans sitting down?" And the reply was, "Because they have sat down." And at which point I lost my temper, and he said, "You know, you basically, you know, who told them to do that?" No reply. And basically saying, you know, how can I put this? You will be, your life will be terminated if you continue to respond in this manner. Go back and do what you need to do. So what you have is a circumstance where the greys will often do small things which to the abductee or the contactee don't appear to make any sense, but is that grey creature getting its own back on its masters by sabotaging the program. So yeah, I do feel sorry for some of the greys actually.
And you mentioned the grid. The patch comes back with the lines, that sort of blue line. So, this idea that there's a sort of grid around the Earth acting as a sort of soul catcher, preventing human souls at the time of death. That's quite a dark image in a way. What's the end game of the entities responsible for that? What do they want from us and our energy?
The question there is regarding what I alluded to earlier about the energy grid around the Earth. The end game is the status quo. They don't want to change. Just keep the status quo as it is. It's been like this for a few thousand years. A few thousand years would do them very nice. The problem is that if you guys start to evolve and you could move into the fourth dimension, over a period of time you will outnumber the bad guys in the fourth dimension. There aren't very many of them. And if you think there's billions of people on the Earth, well, if they all started to wake up and started to evolve, it would become very unpleasant for these creatures who are doing very nicely on your backs. Thank you very much.
Are they sort of living off our energy? Is that
Slight confusion on this because people think feeding off energy. There are two ways that they get something out of it. The first way is sexual tension, physical aggression. That provides them with something very interesting. However, the bit that obviously many people find very, very difficult is the concept that man isn't the top animal on the planet, that there might be a possibility that something, I'll put it a better word, you're sacrificed for something. Imagine that all the children who go missing, and there are many, many thousands of children throughout the world who go missing. Imagine that they're not all just go missing, and turn up one day later. Imagine in the New Forest, 2 or 3 children a month being found in a very bad way. And you can put that down to paedophiles. It's very difficult on a talk like this in the open, in the public. It's not fashionable to say that reptiles eat humans. Dean Warwick at a probe conference some years ago stood up on the stage and was going to make some very interesting statements about that. And for those of you who ever knew that, Dean Warwick fell off the stage dead. I have been given the pre-recording Dean Warwick made to a friend on mobile phone 1 week before that. He'd been meeting with 2 retired chief constables who were prepared to testify what was happening to the children, and he got names and dates. And the moment he fell off the stage dead, those chief constables got the message. So there are creatures who consider themselves above the law because they consider they make the law. They consider humankind to be very, very weak because mammals evolve. Reptiles don't really evolve, it takes a long time. So they consider themselves have fully evolved. They don't smell really, mammals smell. Reptiles think humans stink because we have sweat glands and they don't. So we're seen as a very inferior creature. A reptile maybe has 7 to 8 times the strength that a human has. It will know what you're thinking before you think it. That's why no abductees or contactees ever report weapons. When have you ever heard an abductee or a genuine person tell you that an alien had a gun? They don't need them. The only thing they have are what we call wands to shine a blue light in your head. When you humans were being altered many thousands of years ago, something was done in your head, which is like, I call it a switch. And an alien can put a message in your head, see me as I want you to see me. So it might be a wizard or a fairy, or see me as I really am. And the other one is the blue light. Why do you think, I say this to people, why do you think a police car has a blue light? Why does an ambulance have a blue light? Why blue? And blue is a colour that has an effect on your brain subconsciously that you don't realise. That's why the people in power know. That's why they're blue lights. So if an alien wants to subdue you, it will fire a blue light which goes straight to that part of the brain and you just go unconscious. And now another question.
When you've been speaking to us twice, you've said you guys, you're not part of us. and you also said that you humans, like you're not part of us. I just noticed.
I'm sorry about that.
Mistake or
I'm sorry about that.
it's just very.
Fine. Well, I consider myself 1/3 reptilian. 1/3 reptilian. That's what I just consider myself.
But some of us all could also be that.
Yeah, of course you could. Of course you could. It's whether you
Why
become.
are you make saying that we're not there?
I didn't. But, well.
Or if you say you humans.
Yeah,
that's a presumption.
Yeah, you're right.
about those beings.
I accept that. I think the thing is that I'm trying to get a message across to humankind in general that although things are difficult out there, there is a chance to actually make it better. And there's so many happy, slappy stories on the internet, how good it all is and all the rest of it. And the reality when you look at the news is that things aren't good. And what I want is the human race to actually work as one, and to try and, in its own way, realise what's been done to it, and to make some effort. And I do get cross when I see people falling for the same trap, whether it's money or whatever it is, and putting, I don't know, the idea of money before anything. How can, for instance, how can a guy who works in a bank be worth more than a nurse who saves lives? And it's a fundamental thing which humans accept. Oh, this man earns £300,000 a year because he works in a bank. This is a nurse earning £20,000 a year. Why do we accept that as right? So I get cross sometimes because we're all to blame, including myself. We've allowed this situation to occur where we have an elite above us, and we've elected an elite who are thugs and robbers, and we are only now just waking up to it, and it's a very long call up. So yes, some of you may not